So that's Alyssa.
Yeah, I wasn't involved.
Yeah.
Oh, the meeting is over 2 hours.
Shit, I forgot that. That's in the car. That's a good point. I forgot I put him in there too.
Did you talk to a lady about the
I don't know what you want to say.
I let her know.
Can I not?
Wow, why would that have taken that long?
been dealing with people who did that? She looks at me and I want to tell the doctor, say, who are you?
So anyways, during the,
Well, you should be able to
will
just,
the clicker work?
I think so, because
So I'm gonna be skipping.
you have a forward and a back.
Makes you realize how important it is to
So
have
I'll
this
probably
power.
And if it doesn't, then you and I can work together.
That only counted, I don't wanna mess with all of that when she comes to the mic, so when she starts, I'll just show you, she's gonna wanna go back a few slides and we'll just work on, we'll work it out.
At least you have all your slides numbered.
Good suggestions on the forecast.
23 or whatever.
Those are good. So Julie and Mark
What you're gonna say?
are both going on Tuesday.
Yes.
So I have to be there at noon on Tuesday, cause I'm presenting at 1:30 and we're meeting at noon.
Okay.
So I don't know if that works for you guys or not, but
I like to take my car for flexibility,
Yeah.
so appreciate the thought.
Julie's just willing to ride with whoever.
I'm easy.
She just wants someone to bring her home. That's it. That's what she's told me.
so Mark,
So
when
you're
are you
riding with
going?
Mark.
I'm gonna ride. She's gonna ride with me.
Oh, okay. Alright.
But she might need a ride home.
So are you doing the 1:30?
I'm doing the 1:30.
We may not have to meet.
I'll see you there.
That's why I'm going.
Oh.
To Tuesday for the
Okay.
1:30.
Alright. So I will see you there.
You bet.
So you're presenting.
No, I have archived Bambi Stodd's
Mr. School
previous
Finance.
presentations.
I'm just doing the very, very end of a 3-hour presentation, so
Yeah.
it's a very long one. I previewed it twice. You're gonna be excited.
I bet I am.
I've actually gone to that 2 times. Because the first year it was like.
Oh, is this something?
No, no.
And then the second
the
year,
School Board
I got a little more.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like repeating those courses.
Oh, you're
in
doing
I
college.
found
Yeah.
about 4 sessions I'm going to, they're all about the same thing. I figured,
long one.
this is my
I had to
focus
take
this year.
calculus 2 times, just saying.
Mark is going.
Makes me feel
Oh,
good
Mark,
knowing
that's a
my
great
background
session.
versus yours.
We're gonna work in some stretch breaks. When we get knee deep into the state equalization aid formula, that's gonna
Well,
be.
you should talk to Brian Person about a block's teaching, you know, there's a strategy involved with these 90-minute sessions.
Yeah, we may not have that strategy down.
Hey Steve, are you doing some mindfulness techniques with your group?
I could do that, but I'm at the very end.
Because we could preview
so
some of those if you'd like to show them on Wednesday for our admin.
I could use some advice on that.
All right, very good. Keep that in mind.
Well, I wish I was going early. I'd like to come
It's
and
never
watch
too
you.
late.
Yeah, he'd let you in the
There were 40 people signed
Steve
up.
will
as
even
of
take
last
you, he's
Friday,
got room
so-
now.
That's all.
That's right.
That's usually a lot
Yeah,
more
there was
people.
only 40 people signed up, so.
Can you cut your presentation to an hour and a half to get more people or?
That one, yeah, that one, no. That's quite lengthy.
It's intense. Minute or two.
Oh, we're missing two.
Get these 2 guys back, yeah.
He's kind of gonna figure out a place for us to go to dinner.
Yeah, we have,
What is she asking?
Rebecca, I think.
where was the, we talked about it today. Where were we looking at on Tuesday?
Pier 106. Do you have an idea?
I think
We
I
haven't
could
done.
Oh, is that where we went last time?
Is that near Pier 202?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. It's close enough.
Yeah, we'll have an itinerary come out in the next couple of days
Okay.
here. It'll
Does
lay out
anybody else
everything.
need a ride? I'm gonna take John.
to the January board meeting. We did start at 6 o'clock in closed session, and between closed session and now, we had a little kind of board development discussion. We are now back in open. We need approval of the minutes. I thought we'd do the agenda first.
Minutes, yeah.
Approval of the minutes.
Move approval of the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now we need approval of the agenda. Any additions?
So
Randy?
moved.
As written.
Moved by Mark and second by Jack. Anything about those? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. At this time, if there's anybody in the public that would like to come forward and address any topics on the agenda tonight, you are welcome. Nobody submitted work or paperwork, but know that anytime you can come and address the board with any of the topics that we have. So, on to the reports tonight, starting with our student report. We have Alyssa with us, who's always very entertaining.
Okay, hi, I'm Alyssa, and Anae is very sorry she can't be here tonight, but she's playing at our home varsity girls basketball game.
Okay.
And the document was shared with you very recently, so you might not have had time to print it out, and my printer didn't work, so I'll be sharing this with you on my laptop if it turns on. Maybe.
So Alyssa was giving me a hard time the other day when I ran into her at the high school. She said that the student report was the highlight of every board meeting. And I told her she needed to stay for the next 3 hours afterwards to see the real highlights. She didn't think that was a good idea. But
Maybe just one time, like maybe the last meeting of the year, you should like stay for the whole thing.
yeah.
We can help that happen.
We could- we could.
Cindy, did you say no? No heckling from the group.
Alyssa did share the document with Rebecca and I, so we'll forward it out to you. It was
Okay.
a Google Doc.
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, first we started with FFA, which meets once a month during contact time. And this stands for like Future Farmers of America, but they've recently changed it because they want to include like all agriculture. And the president of FFA is a senior, Dakota Wagner. And there's an upcoming FFA week, which is held once a year in February, where each day has a different theme. So one day is like you bring your tractor to school, or my favorite is you bowl with a chicken. You just get a frozen chicken and you bowl with it during lunch. And
What's Pete have to say about that?
there's like an ice cream day, and there's just a different day for each day of the week. And FFA has alumni nights at Rex's Innkeeper every month, where the old FFA members come and they like talk and have a good time. They participate in different contests. One upcoming one is where they give speeches, have debates, and recite the FFA creed. They participate in a national convention in October in Indianapolis, where all FFA clubs from around the nation meet to go on tours of different agriculture companies, go to a concert, and meet other students from around the nation. In April, they go to a farm, and everyone in FFA has a part of the farm where they give a presentation to 4th graders, and that's part of one of their like main events. Next is HOSA. HOSA is a career and technical student organization that is specifically aimed towards students looking into future health professions. The president of HOSA is Tyler Gavinsky, and the vice president is Abby Keelich. They operate on 2 main fronts, with one being community service and the other being leadership/competition. They both work in unison to create the club as a whole. For community service, the students do community service related to health, with some examples including addressing obesity, heart disease, or working with music and memories. Much of the community service is student-driven, with the students' interest driving the community service for that year. Along with service, they also have leadership and competition component. They have fall and state conference with events that focus on knowledge, demonstration of skills, and leadership in team events. And some of those demonstration of skills is demonstrating how to do CPR, give CPR, and how to get like first aid certification. And lastly, team leadership events could include hostable and biomedical debate, which is what one group in HOSA is currently doing. Art club is very open. It's every Wednesday after school, and Mrs. Proctor is the main advisor. And what you mainly do in art club is make art. So you just go there after school for an hour and a half, and you can pick anything you want to do with any of the supplies that are given in the art room, and you can paint or make pottery or anything that comes to your mind. And yeah, just the main idea is that you love art and you want to learn new techniques for creating great work. Skills USA is a nationwide organization promoting technological skills and leadership skills. It's a student-run organization with student officers at the local, state, and national level. Jay Barma, a senior here at Waunakee High School, is actually a national officer. She was a state officer last year, but worked really hard to become a national officer this year, and was named as the Region 3 Vice President within Skills USA. And within Skills USA, students compete at district, regional, state, and nationals. And if you place first, you get to go to nationals. And at nationals, there are over 100 different competitions ranging from TV broadcasting, engineering, cooking, and welding. As for our school's Skills USA team, they've competed at a District 4 competition at Watertown High School. The Engineering Challenge team includes Zach Diedrich and AJ Beery, who placed third place at the conference. And upcoming events for the team include regionals at Southwest Technical College in Fenimore, Wisconsin. Next is Friends of Smith's Woods. So this is a student-led organization that works to maintain the school's forest, Smith's Woods. And they also schedule hikes around the forest year-round, with one so far this fall, and upcoming one this winter, and a wildflower hike this spring. The club also is involved in a butterfly event at Hauser Road Prairie, which they've been doing for the past 2 years. Overall, they are involved in lots of outdoor adventuring and do lots of activities as a club outside of taking care of the forest. One of these activities include tie-dyeing t-shirts together. Student Council, lastly, has started to prepare for JDRF, which is helping with awareness for diabetes. And by doing this, they've been having students go to local businesses and asking for donations so they can raise money at different games throughout the high school. And our first JDRF game is on January 19th at a boys basketball game. And coming up, there's a blood drive on January 30th and 31st. And we have also been trying to organize finals bagels, which will be selling bagels during finals week to bring some kind of lightning mood during finals week to raise money for Student Council.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
I just want to say again, you're doing a great job, and we talk about clubs and kind of approve ones that are active and new clubs that come, and it's just great to hear what clubs are doing. It just is really appreciated. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alyssa.
And following that, we have our teacher report.
Good evening. Lynn and I are both going to talk about two opposite things. I get to be the one that starts us off. I'm not sure if you last week or maybe before had heard about the more teacher licensing changes that are being proposed by DPI. So I'm going to speak to that just a little bit. So there are proposed changes to the licensure program, the licensure law. The gist of it was supposed to be to help with the teacher shortage. And there are a lot of things addressed in it that will do that we're all about. We want quality teachers in the classrooms for kids. And so to be able to work with DPI, WEAC's been working with them, is great. There were some things added to that, though. It's not just for licensure. There were some teacher rights proposals also in this, in the proposal. The one that we're really concerned about is the creation of a broad category of arbitrary judgments called boundary violations that could lead to teacher license revoking their license for things such as discussing your personal life in a classroom, talking with a student for a non-educational purpose, or showing favoritism. Those are examples that were given to this broad spectrum. Another one was expanding DPI's authority not only to revoke licenses, but also to be giving reprimands and suspensions from their level to local districts. I could see that as a board, you would be very concerned about taking that out of your hands and putting it in the DPI's hand. We're very concerned about things that were added. We don't know how any of that addresses teacher shortage by taking away rights. There's some other ones. Your penalty will be lessened if you report another teacher for violations.
Oh my.
They would lessen your violation. So there's a lot of very awful things in this. I just wanted you to be aware to watch for it. We, in the next couple of weeks as teachers, there are public hearings being held around the state. The Madison one, though, is during the day, so teachers won't be there.
It's this week, isn't it?
Is next week. So we will be sending in written responses and replies to it, but it's really concerning. It was supposed to be for addressing teacher shortage, and this is obviously not things that will help with the teacher shortage at all. So I get that part to tell you about. Lynn gets to tell you about some good stuff happening.
Yeah, I'm about the joy of teaching.
I'm going to follow up with Alyssa with trying to combat the winter blues, because as you all know, it's winter, and this time of year is when teachers can kind of get into a slump. And so one of the things that our organization is doing is we're holding a social. We do this a couple times a year for our members, and so we have one coming up. We just wanted to let you know about that, and we always hold it locally, which is really nice, just to support our local businesses as well. And we have some fun events, including like a raffle and some things. So just to kind of, give we do fun things too. That's right, to keep our members active. And we just got out of our leadership meeting, and so tonight we just had our first discussion about a big project we have coordinated with WNC. And so what we do is we in our works with WNC and the relationship that we've built throughout the years, we also inquire about the things that they might really be in need of. And so then, yes.
What is WNC?
The Waunakee Neighborhood Connection.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so that serves our families right here in the community who are in need. And so based upon the needs that they have given us, we have just sort of spearheaded what we believe will be our next project, which you'll want to just stay tuned for to hear about it, because it'll have a pretty cool presence there outside of WNC. So we're giving you a little feeler.
We could take us, but it may not be.
But it might not be. It's a shed.
We might be building a shed.
Yes,
With
because
all of our skills.
all of their, yes,
Yeah.
all of our skills, because everything that they have for snow removal and such is held out, has to stay
Their
outside.
lawnmower and stuff just sits
So,
outside. and things, so
yeah.
we need a shed.
So there's our joyful update.
Mark, did you have a question about what I was saying? So watch for it. I'm sure you're getting notifications
Mhm.
too.
For sure, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies.
Our third report tonight is from any board member that would like to share meetings or trainings or events that they have attended. It's a holiday, yes.
Well, I would also like to piggyback on some comment I think Randy was. He was a part of the career readiness interviews. I've also participated in those interviews for, I don't know how many years now. And it is always so refreshing. These are usually sophomores who, as part of their coursework, it's basically like a mock interview kind of process. And it's first practice for some, and getting speaking with somebody and sharing what they've done through school, and you have the opportunity to provide some feedback to, in many cases, like, don't be afraid to mention this, because that's what employers are looking for versus, some of the other things. So it's wonderful, and there are some I'm always so thrilled with the things our students are doing and what they get involved in. And so I encourage anybody who has an interest in doing something like this. It's an intense morning, because you basically have to have 15 minutes to do an interview, provide recap and feedback, and then boom, boom, boom. They give you a little bit of a break, but it's maybe up to 13 or so minutes. But it is exciting, and we have some phenomenal students in our schools doing some phenomenal things, and it's always just a thrill to be part of that process. So, thank you.
I was just at a 2-hour TIF meeting, of which you guys got some info, I think, too. We're gonna have some time to talk about it a little bit coming up here, because the meeting, the final meeting on it won't be until somewhere in February after our other meeting, so. Interesting stuff. We'll have to see how it fits into our, what do we call it?
Position statement. Proposal.
Yeah, our business
Our
plan.
position
Yeah,
statement.
position statement.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? All right, next we have the WASB resolutions for 2018. David is our delegate this year. He will be joining us at convention. And in your board book, you had the 2018 resolutions. And I don't know how we want to do that, if you want to take feedback now,
Might as well now, since it's next Wednesday.
or if you want to personally contact David, or,
The only one I saw personally reading through them, there's a lot of repealing and stuff.
right.
The one repealing the 190 days support of this, to get rid of the number of days of instruction. And last resolution, which I think was in 2014 or 13, said that the WASB supported getting rid of the days requirement and only using the hours requirement. Well, they got rid of the days requirement and now have an hours requirement. Well, now the WASB recommendation from someone is to get rid of the hours requirement. And they're saying some school districts want flexibility, and the resolution, I believe, specifically mentions if you have a school district that exceeds or the in your evaluation, your grading, you exceed expectations, then you could apply to have, there's 2 bills already being introduced. You could apply to allow you to change your hours of instruction. So you wouldn't have a mandatory hour requirement, or it would be significantly reduced some way. I gotta admit, I just think there and say, hold it, for years we were saying get rid of the days, let's have an hour requirement. Now we're suddenly saying, oh, we got that, now let's get rid of the hour requirement. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, we get students coming in and students going out. There should be some sort of a limit. So my first thought is that's a resolution I probably wouldn't support.
I agree with your sentiment. You have to have some level of a standard. And in the accident, I'm sure what it's being proposed as is from some districts that are trying to reduce those down further for budgetary purposes. I'm sure that's what's driving it. But I agree with you that it should be that having both standards a few years ago was overkill, having days and hours, but getting rid of all of that and then just leaving it up to, I would have concerns with that as well.
I agree with your assessment as well, and I think in the past, because I've gotten the pleasure of being the voting delegate for quite a few times, don't we generally allow David quite a bit of flexibility in terms of listening to the debate on the floor and using his best judgment based on that debate to vote. So I look forward to your input and updates, however it unfolds.
What about the FTE calculation? Do I misread that, or so is that suggesting 3 options, that if you want to maintain the current status, you can? Or you can go to the 5 or 3, or is the 5-3 supposed to replace the current?
No, each school district, under the resolution, each school district could pick which one they want to use, which just seems like a way to make the school funding formula
Sure.
scarier. But it's supposed to help declining enrollment districts like a Stone or someplace like that. But in a weird way, by doing that, you hurt a district that has increasing enrollment. I mean, no matter how you do it, you're taking money from one district and giving it to another.
Right.
No matter which way you go. So for us, it's probably bad
That's what I thought.
to go to a 5 or a 3, because based on our projections last month, there is almost no year where we aren't going up. So a 5 or a 3 would hurt. If anyone else used a 5 or 3, that would hurt us. If And the only other question I had was, does anybody know anything about, they were mentioning about some sort of new suggestions on the national level?
I had never heard of the No Time to Lose report, that No Time to Lose thing.
Yeah.
You heard anything about that?
I haven't heard of it.
I'd be scared to sit there and say, oh, yeah, we should be voting and creating committees and on this thing that we've never even heard what their
No.
goals are.
Is it true, is it accurate, Julie, that during the delegate assembly, there's often amendments to these as
A
well?
lot.
A lot.
So there's a lot of that iteration.
Tweaking back and forth one way or the other.
And what I do appreciate is that, we also have the opportunity, like some of the things you're saying now, you get up to the mic and share your thoughts.
Yeah.
And that influences
Mhm.
the process in a big way, because sometimes people haven't necessarily considered that perspective after having just read what's printed.
And you're good at doing that, David.
And you're good at
Yeah,
doing it.
it's a good experience.
Okay.
No, I think you're a great delegate. Peggy.
I had two comments, and they were more questions, and maybe, Dave, you can find out. For Resolution 1810, local fiscal control, they're talking about amending something, and I'm curious why, basically it says the WSB believes the local elected school board should have control of its local fiscal affairs, and then they strike out, whatever, yeah. Be allowed to manage its affairs with provision for interdistrict cooperation, which I think is sometimes a good thing. I don't understand why they cross that section out in that. And so my question would be, why would that be eliminated? Because that is in fact somewhat local control as well. So that's the one question I have on that. And then the other question that I had was the teacher certification licensure, 1813. In that revised proposed language, there is a phrase that also talks about adequately compensated. I don't see how that fits into licensure certification. That is a separate topic. Compensation is not a licensure thing. So I don't know why, not sure this falls under licensure as they're proposing. I think it should be eliminated because it's not licensure. Unless there's something that, Randy, are you aware of that? I mean, I don't know why that language exists under that. That's a separate topic and a separate issue.
They just linked it all together.
Yeah, I mean, highly educated, highly trained, effective professional, yes, but where adequately compensated fits into that, I don't know why.
Mhm.
And I would recommend that people do it. That's it, that's the only comments I have.
Anybody else want to share now, or if it's okay, David, they can review and share to you as the time approaches? Thank you, and thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Dave.
Update on our spring elections. And thank you, Mark, for turning in your papers and running again to come by Anna. And Peggy, sorry you were not going to be joining us.
And then I'll let Randy explain.
Talk about the vacancy.
So right now, we do have, obviously, as Joan said, Mark has put in for the town of Vienna. So we'll be on the ballot in that area. For the town of Westport, city of Middleton, city of Madison seat, we did not have anybody who put in their paperwork for that vacancy. So where that leaves us is that between now and the election in April, if there are write-in candidates, I mean, as Rebecca and I have worked and sorted through what the next process is, a write-in candidate who receives the most votes will receive then the opportunity to serve in that seat. If we do have a write-in candidate who falls into that category, then, and they accept the position, then that will be for a 3-year term. If we don't have any write-in candidates, or the person who would have the most write-in votes would decline, then we have a vacancy on the board, of which then the board has a process per our policies for appointing somebody from that region of our district to serve for the next year, and then it would go in front of the electors the following year. So I guess at this point, we just need to make sure that it's known that we do have continue to have a vacancy, and I would encourage anybody from the public who would be interested in running, who lives in Westport, city of Middleton, city of Madison, within our boundaries of our district, to contact me, Joan, or another board member to let us know that you're interested, so we can kind of keep track of kind of where that is, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that people have. That's our process.
Yeah, hopefully somebody will come forward.
Yes.
So at this time of the year, in this kind of quarter time of the year, we have our board evaluation and then our superintendent evaluation. We are doing the school perception again, and that access code has been provided at your tables, followed by the board evaluation, the open-ended questions, the summary questions are also there. And I guess we would like to see about returning that by the next board meeting in February, and at that time, the superintendent evaluation will be provided, and we will go over all of them in April, is the timing this year?
I think it's April.
So it'll be given out in February, returned in March, so we have time to compile, and then we will address that. I think the timing is April.
Yeah, I think that the way that we had agreed to do the evaluation process and then the setting of next year's priorities would be to do that at a time when it would provide individuals who provided input who were on the board to be part of the discussion,
Correct.
but also enable somebody who might be a new board member coming onto the board to be able to participate in the discussion
Correct.
as an incoming board member. So the decision to hold it, I can't remember the specifics, like after the election, but before the turnover of board positions would do it, so that enables that kind of continuity and an introduction to a process essentially, so.
So anyway, if you could each take time in the next month to fill out the board self-evaluation, and then we'll go on to the superintendent's evaluation next time.
So
what you
those are
have
the codes that are.
Right, those are the ones that you have at your seat from the school perceptions. There's a unique code for that. If you misplace your sheet, I believe Rebecca has a copy of it, she can help you with that. But then we'll be able to, once we have everybody's in there, then we can do the compilations of that. We thought since we had them, right now we would hand them out and get
Is
that
this
process.
online, so we can just send it electronically, or
Yeah,
is this?
Rebecca will send this, the open
Just a
response,
Word
the open
document.
response
Yeah.
questions to you. So we just gave you one in hard copy tonight, but
Right,
she'll
right.
send you an electronic copy of it.
Okay, the other thing that I wanted to comment on is, next month also, in addition to the superintendent evaluation tool, which we designed, there are also, we have identified 5 priorities that we're gonna be working on for the year. And what we'll be discussing soon is, how do we feel, we have a couple of updates on how do we feel we're doing on the superintendent priorities, our joint priorities, and the board priority. That there's also an evaluation of how we think we did on those priorities that will also be handed out. And basically, support for that will come from what we'll be discussing shortly. So there'll be 2 things handed out.
Right.
A new process this year, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you. And now, we do have an update from Randy on our district priorities.
And I'm just going to speak from the document that was in your packet. One of the things that I realized as I'm walking through and just given the updates on this, we gave one in October, now one in January. Plan to give one that's a little bit more detailed prior to you filling out any of the evaluation pieces on any of these, because I think there's some things that we can show as exhibits and other things that can help kind of spark kind of what those goals were actually intended to be and where they're actually, how they're kind of concluding towards the end of the school year coming in the spring. But just to start off, the first one we had, which was a joint goal, which is on communication. There hasn't been a lot to update you on since the October meeting. We've had some continued conversations with some colleagues as far as what's actually happening around the area of communication, how districts have done communication plans. I'm looking forward to the state convention coming up here in next week. Part of what their theme is how to tell your story, which is really a communication piece. So I'm looking forward to some of the folks that I want to talk to. I'm anticipating will be at the convention. I want to utilize that as kind of our next step. One of the pieces that we put forth here was to complete a communications audit. So I want to try and see what does that look like and what are some of the folks who might be able to offer that service to us and talk to them at convention and then bring some of those pieces back. If we move that forward, that would be something that hopefully we can complete this spring and then really give us kind of the framework of what our next steps would be after that. The next item is really salaries and benefits. This is a large item we spent a lot of time on this fall. We spent obviously looking at establishing what our salary and benefits movement was going to be at our November meeting. That included consideration of the QTI study and other markers that we're really trying to assess where we were with all of our employee groups. I think some of the things that we are looking for from a long-term visionary piece is kind of how do we start to incorporate really differentiation and looking at how can we change some of our compensation strategies for all of our groups that would incorporate things beyond cost of living increases. That's been a conversation we've had around this table for a number of years. We're starting to have the dialogue with respect to that. At the last HR meeting, I provided really an updated, a little bit more detailed vision for what that could incorporate. Part of that was building in the why we were going to be doing this. So building in some of the rationale of why we want to look at this, what our history is for our employee groups, and given some feedback that the HR committee gave at the last meeting, we'll be updating that to at least serve as kind of a starting point for the discussion. The biggest piece, and this goes back to what Julie's point was during our board development time tonight, was we've gotten to a point where you now have to, you start to see what you may want to accomplish in those areas, and the next step is putting together those strategies of how you would accomplish it. But you need to now, we've realized we need to step back momentarily to see how does this line up with other strategic priorities that we have in the district. As we see next month, the facility maintenance program is coming forward in front of the board as part of our strategic plan. We have conversations that are ongoing with the curriculum committee about technology. All of these pieces really interplay together, particularly as we're looking at it from a budgetary standpoint. So that's a piece that I think became very clear as we started to move through this from an HR perspective, that we needed to see the other big pieces that we're moving and how are they going to coalesce together in order for us to really meet some of our larger strategic planning needs. The next item is really institutionalization of our strategic plan and what are some of the strategies that we are using for that. I think that's really one of just trying to make it's wanting to have the strategic plan be something that is really how we do our business. Peggy talked about it before, that over the last year or so, we've really changed some of the dialogue that we've had around the table at board meetings. You'll see tonight you have 3 strategic planning reports that are all part of really major initiatives and directions that we are working on as a district. So I think that's a piece that makes it visible. There's things that we continue to talk about at our administrative meetings in different areas. It permeates through some of our other work that we have in the district. And as obviously, as Steve has been working with like Forecast 5 and the forecast models, it's been a driver as far as how we're trying to put dollars and prioritization together. A few things that I see kind of happening as far as, because our goal really was how do we kind of forward that and make that part of our dialogue. We sat down with Pete here just not too long ago before the holidays. We talked about what's happening in 2018 in the district. And the big piece that we talked to you about, Pete, was about planning. And I think that's really kind of, I appreciate the article that you put together with regards to that. I'm also going out to staff meetings this month and really just taking literally 10 minutes to talk about really what is our strategic plan, what are these pieces that we are talking about, where did it come from, but also really wanting to really share that how these things are intertwined together. I think when we first put these pieces in place, one of the concerns we had was that they operated too much in silos. And we had conversations about how they look on paper. And I think what we're seeing now is that there's definitely an intermingling of them, not only from a programmatic standpoint, but also from how are we going to be then prioritizing resources as we move forward. So wanting to have that discussion. The other piece that really, again, fits into what we talked about during our board development time was how do we communicate about this? We just talked about how the board is looking at 4 different articles to write for the Tribune. So that'll be something we'll talk to you about, Pete, as far as something that we'd like to move forward with. But I also look at how the general population of our community receives information. And one of the things that I'd like to explore is doing something that is really another mailing that goes out to everybody. And something this spring that could identify those successes that we have as a community, but also then identify our successes as a school district, but also then identifying the areas that we're doing planning in. And I think that was a piece, Joan, that you and I have talked about, is we've often seen in the community sees planning taking place around facilities, maintenance, referendum-related things, And really what we're trying to show is that our planning aspects are really moving around all aspects of our organization. Trying to put something together that can kind of kick that off and share that with the general community. And then just continued work on the whole priorities of what's actually on our strategic plan and making sure those stay forward. The next item, which was a goal that was given to me by the board, was looking at really where are we at with succession planning within our district. I mean, as we look at we've been very blessed with longevity amongst all of our administrators, but there is a point where we need to start looking at what does our district look like, how do those positions move forward. What I would like to do is have a conversation in more specifics, because it does involve people, in closed session in February. But I think the other piece that for the board to really be thinking about is that as we look at succession planning, and what I pointed out in my update in October is it's bigger than just deciding on a position in a person. It's really starting to look at how are we organized as a school district around these things. And when we look at how we are structured from an administrative level and how we get our work completed, now as a district of 4,300 students, it's not a whole lot different than when we had 2,000 students. And I think it's a point where we need to start looking at how do we need to continue to evolve, and what are some of the effective ways that we need to look at that. So I want to be able to share some of those ideas. This is probably a multi-year process for us to be discussing, but this is really the goal that was set, and we discussed it at our board and my evaluation last year, is trying to get at least a sense of discussion as far as how do these things evolve so that we have a plan in place that surrounds really how we can continue to be functioning and organized as a district. The last goal is the one that we really just spent a lot of time on in our board development, which was on really board governance, particularly focusing on community engagement. And I think what I've included here are just some of the notes of things that we've started from our November board development meeting through the conversations that we've had tonight, which has started to really lay forth some action plans for writing some articles for the paper, of which Peggy will be the first one, and our goal, Pete, is in February. So we'll be looking at trying to put an update that we can have in the paper that is kind of updating us on really a lot of the things we're talking about with regards to planning and others. So with that, that's just kind of a quick update of kind of where I see these pieces at the moment. I think that prior to us kind of looking at this from an evaluatory standpoint on how we are doing collectively on these, I'd like to really put some additional detail to that for a future report that can also tie some examples in so that you can have some context. But I would be happy to answer any questions that you have at this point. That just really kind of gives you a sense of where we're at sitting in January.
The only other thing that I had is these were priorities that we collectively agreed to last year. And it doesn't, and these could actually become the same priorities to be continued or modified, added to, or, for next year as well. So when we get to the point of evaluating,
Correct.
that keeping that in mind.
That's a great point. I think some of these are multi-year.
They
definitely are. And these are kind of, and I think you can take a look then at the performance indicators may evolve, but the general goal may stay the same, or the general objective may stay the same.
Any other comments? Thank you, Randy, for putting that together. Next, we have an update. We have two TIF districts coming on board, 8 and 9. Gary is our rep. I think our focus tonight should maybe revisit the position statement that we had some discussion with, that we began last month, that has some modifications to it, and then maybe hear from Gary. He was at a meeting tonight if he wants to share anything.
So we can start off with the position paper. What you see highlighted in red is what Steve and I gleaned from the input the board provided last month. So this has been in front of you, I think, at least twice. This is the third time I think it's come in front of you. Our whole premise behind it was to really create a document that could be given to our rep to the Joint Review Board. That's the role that Gary is playing right now, and to provide them some guidance as far as general concepts that the board feel are important when considering TIF. So we've kind of laid out 3 different scenarios, and we also added some language in that really tried to provide some flexibility last month, so that the representative can really have some judgment that they're looking at as far as some of the greater good issues as well. So I guess what we would like to see is did we meet the expectation as far as the edits that you wanted to see within that document? Because this would be the focus then that Gary can use as he's moving forward, looking at TIF 8 and 9, which are in front of our community right now.
Mark?
I appreciate the work that went into the editing. I think it captures the essence of what I was looking for. Gives some flexibility to the individual, yet clarifies in general what our position is.
More guidance.
And so I was going to say, so.
I agree. I like the wording where it's not an absolute, but
Right.
it gives you kind of guidance. Gary?
I agree, and I think this is a great thing for us to do. I'm gonna try and get, they just handed out today at noon, the new finished product with that. I will try and get that to everybody.
I think they sent it to us as well, and
Oh, did they?
is that what you guys forwarded out today, Steve?
Okay, so
that
then you
was
all
that
got
was
it.
the current ones for 8 and 9 that I believe.
You
that-
came out today.
Came out today.
The ones that are in board book right now.
So,
No.
it would have come through email, I believe. Did we forward those out?
I
we got
didn't
it
forward
through
just to Gary, I didn't forward.
So you
to
should
Gary.
give that to
I
all.
don't think I saw
all-
one.
Yeah, so that you
I,
just
it
forwarded
didn't
that.
change a lot, but some of the
Right.
numbers did change, and now they're actually talking about possibly changing the district to include some things or not.
Okay.
So if they do that, all the numbers change again, every one of them, so, on paybacks and this and that. To me, the biggest thing that's happened with this, as you study it more and more, is that the but-for is a twist. It's not it used to be the old days, when the canning factory was a place that they were gonna do a TIF, if you didn't help with that, that
Nobody was
wasn't gonna
gonna
happen,
write
because
in.
no private person could come in and do that. Now the but-for is twisted into, will this company come here but for us helping this? And that's what it's twisted into. And so they use that and they justify it by that. So when you're reading this, to me, even in our position, it muddies what you're looking at. So I would appreciate everybody looking at it, and we'll have to go, the next meeting, the village has to vote on it on their meeting on February 5th.
Okay.
And then the
We will have a meeting.
joint meeting has 10 to 30 days to meet after that. So I would assume we'll have a meeting in there, in between here, to do our final thing after everybody's looked at it decent.
So what we'll do is so if we forward out what you received today,
Correct.
we'll get that out to everybody.
Then we should have it on our board for some discussion then
All right.
on our next meeting.
All right.
And we can
All right.
look at it again. But I myself want to look at this position and then look at that and see how we see it fitting, but,
I mean, if they change the map, that's one thing. I mean, right now, they've got 49 properties in there, only 3 aren't occupied. Which, I mean, the biggest part of it is the 12 properties that are the Update development. And they already bought and they're already developing.
Right.
And so, to me, a but-for test on 3 properties, you could make an argument for. That right now, in all 3 stages of phases that they have planned, none of those 3 properties get developed. Why do we have a 50-property TID district that people are already owning, occupying, and developing?
right. And they're looking at
Just-
potential future parking. Part of the there's a $1.1 million, $1.125 million section that's of potential parking and a potential purchase of properties later on. That's like 2 years down the line, and then 4 years down the line, there's another thing where they're looking at potential downtown parking and this and that. And then there's the Tiwa one, which has gotten a lot of press so far, and that they haven't proposed anything there in the beginning stages of anything they're looking at. There hasn't been anything really vetted is the new big word, but they haven't looked at any of the problems with that or whatever and have gotten feedback already. But that's a potential down the line too. So, and then there's the one I didn't even know about, which is what's the end one?
American Legion.
I don't know. There's three potential spots right now that they set out. what's the last one?
The one in the industrial park out here?
The one right down by the
Oh,
Legion.
the other TID district.
Yeah, there's 3 spots. So the Hovde one is the main one that they're working on right now, and, yeah.
So the updates that came out at noon are updates on both of those, 8 and 9.
Yes,
And we'll send those out, so.
yes.
And, all right. And then
And
what we will have time then for is at the next board meeting in February.
Yes.
We should have this back on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, you'll have had another meeting prior to that, or you?
No.
Not, all right.
Our meeting would be after that.
Okay.
For-
And
for the
I would
joint
say,
boards.
Gary, if we see, anybody, if there's questions that you're seeing from that, this next month is a good opportunity where Steve and I and Gary, we could go
Yep.
meet with the village, get some of the questions answered that would need to be answered, that we can bring
That
back.
would be great.
All right.
An example of what they're looking at switching is, if you look at what's included behind the Hovde one of them was property 33 when you look at it. It's the Quonset hut that's over there, which really is where the road is, not part of Hovde's. Which that's what it ends up being. Some of it is Waunakee wanting to do a road, and that really isn't a piece that's in the Hovde, or should be considered into the Hovde project. So that was one property where they separate out. It's possible at the T-Wall one, right now they have both sides of that block there. That's possible by the end that isn't there either. It's just, there's some things they have to finish up yet before it's a final thing. But-
Okay.
And they have to decide fairly fast if they're gonna change that, if they're gonna hit their meetings, or it's all gonna get pushed back another month.
Mark?
Gary, in terms of the process, when I read the info, it identified the voting entities, and they talk about community member. Is that member gonna be identified far enough in advance so that?
They voted him on this meeting that we had today, so that is.
So that will be public, so if people want to contact this person, they can?
Yes.
Okay.
I murder his name always. It's Jim Elkalog or something.
Oh, Elvacroft.
What you said.
Elvacroft?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does he have an open line?
I didn't really talk to him. He just got voted on today.
Julie?
I just want to remind again the general public, I mean, we certainly don't mean to give the impression that as a group we are anti-growth for our community, because we know as a school district, we benefit from growth. But this affects our constituents in a different way and in a broader perspective than just the village of Waunakee. And as a reminder, we are 1 vote of 5. We don't get input on how they're tweaking with what these developments are. We're just asked to give 1 vote. So that's the extent of our input on it. So it's frustrating how much time we continue to have to spend on this. I'm glad we at least get a vote, but I get concerned that it gets construed that somehow we're anti-growth or anti-community when that's not it. The way these pieces fit together affect us as a school district and affect a broader portion of school district people that we're responsible to be good stewards of resources of than just the village board.
Any other comments for this or for Gary? All right, thank you, Gary, for doing
Good, thanks,
that.
Gary.
And now, the strategic planning portion, always a highlight of the board, starting with literacy for all.
So I think you all know Amy Johnson. And she's done a great job working with all of our literacy programs, so she's here to give us an update on what's happening since the last time we talked to her. And there's some other reports coming up later this spring that we'll also have, so she's filling the gaps, so it's all yours, Amy.
Well, thanks. I am excited to talk to you about literacy for all. We're talking about all students in all disciplines, so it's a big subject area. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I could talk about it for hours, but I won't. Don't worry, because I have 2 of my colleagues waiting to also give you updates later on. So I will really just hit some of the high points with you and talk a little bit about some of the big projects that we're working on. This won't be really a curriculum update. You had a 7-12 curriculum update in last spring, and you'll have K-6 this spring. So really, this is just some of the bigger projects that we're working on. So here you can see where Literacy for All fits into the strategic plan. It's obviously in the teaching and learning domain there. And here is our mission statement that really kind of summarizes what I'm talking about, with all students in all areas of literacy: reading, listening, viewing, thinking, speaking, writing, and then also all curricular areas. So this is a mission statement that really drives our work. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to hit a few highlights for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our literacy coaching model. I'm going to be talking about a co-planning, co-teaching pilot that we're doing right now. I'm going to be talking about writing, both in K-6 and 7-12, and then also disciplinary literacy. And again, you'll have the curriculum update at your May curriculum meeting. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is literacy coaching. We haven't talked about this model for a couple of years, so I really wanted to circle back with you and let you know kind of what's been going on. So one of the main roles that the literacy coaches engage in is student-centered coaching cycles, we call them. So a teacher will partner up with a coach, they will set a specific goal, and the goal is directly related to our standards, and then even more specifically to learning targets. So during this cycle, which is, we offer 4 per year, so maybe 6 to 8 weeks per cycle. The teacher can interact with the coach in a variety of ways. The coach can do some co-planning with them. The coach can do some modeling or demonstration lessons. They can team teach. The coach can observe the teacher and provide feedback. And throughout this, they have a student-centered goal that they're trying to work on, and they take pre-data and then post-data. That is one of the main roles that the literacy coaches are working in. In addition to that, the coaches also work with teachers, of course, in their grade level or job-alike teams or PLCs. They offer a lot of before and after school workshops. And then they're also just an open door resource for teachers, really for anything that they need. Yeah,
Do you mind if we asked her?
Not at all, not at all.
In the coaching model, the student-centered, where you pair the teacher and the coach together,
Yeah.
like what kind of time period would they be paired up? Would that be like a semester long or?
Yeah, so we are doing 4 rounds of them, we call them, so it's about quarterly, but it's not quite a full quarter, so maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So they're fairly short cycles. They're long enough where they can really dig in and the coach can get to know the students and they can collaborate, but it's shorter than a quarter.
And how many of those pairs would like a single coach have?
Usually about 3 per round.
Per quarter? Okay.
Yep. So, but sometimes there's more or less. Sometimes the teacher will work with a pair. Sometimes they'll work with a whole team. We have a coach coming up that's working with the whole grade level. So it does vary.
Thank you.
Yep. So as part of the coaching model, they do take student data. So whatever the teacher wanted to work on, we have that pre and post data. In addition, we also survey staff to talk about their experience with coaching, and so I have some of that data here. So this was a recent survey that we did, and it wasn't immediately after the cycles. We have some reflection data that we get from them. This was a year following their cycle. So we asked, have you been continuing with the changes even after you stopped working with the coach? And 70% of the teachers said a great deal, 30% said somewhat. So really all teachers were able to at least continue with some aspect of their coaching. The next question was about the impact professionally, reflecting on your coaching cycle. So 50% of our respondents said it was very positive, 47% positive, and then 3% slightly positive. And then finally, we asked about recommending this to your colleagues. And so 64% would strongly recommend a cycle, 31% would recommend, and 6% would neither recommend nor discourage, but no one would discourage. We were really happy with these results because it really spoke to kind kind of the longevity of the impact of it, and also the positive support that people had felt professionally.
One, the numbers are very impressive. Two, I think I recall was 2 years ago, we heard from K-6, the reading people, and with the scores they shared, they attributed so much of their success to the coaching. And so exciting to see that correlation. Question I had, how, in a given school, how long does it take for a coach to go through the entire staff? Or does that not ever happen?
Yeah. That does vary quite a bit per building. Some buildings have some teaming going on, so a teacher isn't necessarily even teaching ELA, so like at the intermediate school. And so we have focused on teachers who teach ELA,
Okay.
special education teachers. We have worked with ELL teachers, library and media specialists, so other non-classroom teachers. But that does vary. But there are, I think, probably almost 3 of the schools that have gone through with everyone. So we have offered it as kind of self-nominating of who would like to work with the coach. Every year we do a survey. But then after we got through our first year or two, if there were some people that we hadn't worked with yet, we would reach out to them and say, we haven't worked with you yet. Before we pick up someone for a second round, we'd like to give you the chance. And so I know for sure 2, and I think maybe a 3rd school have gone through all the teachers at least once. So this is just a little background around our staffing. So as you might recall, we started with 50% in K-6, but then we increased that to 1.0. And then starting next year, we will have 1.0 in our middle school and high school also. So I'm very excited about that. So our current K-6 coaches, and then also our 2 7-12 coaches, have all earned coaching certificates from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. So we're very proud of that accomplishment, and they've found that that has been really helpful for their work also. Anything else about literacy coaching that you'd like me to respond to before I move on? All right. This next area is co-planning and co-teaching, and this is a project that we're working on with special education also. So this is a partnership between a special education teacher and a regular education teacher, and they are co-teaching in the literacy block. So the students with disabilities and the regular education students are all included in this co-taught class. And the special ed teacher and the regular ed teacher are sharing planning, they're sharing the instructional delivery, they're sharing assessing students. It's really been a positive partnership so far. So they plan weekly. We have also provided them with a half day of release quarterly, and that really helps them get a jump start on some of their planning to really talk more in depth, like at the beginning of a big unit, how they're going to differentiate. We have sent some folks out, some of the coaches, to get some training in various models for co-teaching, and also one of our special ed teachers. And those folks have been doing some professional development with the 15 people in this pilot, talking about different models that you could use, different ways that you could structure your classroom. So we just did a mid-year survey, and the anecdotal feedback has been very, very positive between both the special ed teachers and the regular ed teachers. They cited a lot of benefits for the students and then also benefits for them professionally. We are monitoring the academic data. We don't have a lot yet. We have a baseline. We're starting to get some kind of mid-year data in, but so far that's very positive. So we're really excited about this partnership. As you know from looking at data over the years, we have a gap between how our students with disabilities achieve and our regular ed students achieve, and we feel like this is really has a lot of potential to close that gap. We're really excited about the pilot. Any questions about that area?
Amy, is that going on in all 3 of our schools? All 3
It's
of our
K-6, so
all
all 4.
And there is somebody piloting in all 4?
Yep. Yep.
So this is actually before you can get into the RTI piece?
Yes,
This
this
is
is
for
the
the day-to-day.
universal. Yep,
Okay.
yep. So then another big area for us this year is writing. And so for K-6, we are currently piloting 2 different programs for possible adoption. One of them is the Units of Study, and that's from Lucy Calkins and the Teachers College. And then the other program is Being a Writer, which is from the Center for the Collaborative Classroom. That's also the publisher for our main vocabulary and comprehension resource, Making Meaning. And so we're doing a pretty extensive pilot. We have at each grade level in each building 2 teachers. So one is using Units of Study and one is using Being a Writer. So we have a lot of experience at all grades and all buildings. We meet monthly and talk amongst the grade levels and then also project-alike groups. And we're looking to make our decision in April so that we can purchase in time for next year. The 7-12 group, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so what
Yeah.
does that process look like in terms of making a decision? Who gets input and who gets to vote on which way you go?
Yeah, so I am asking for input from all of the pilot teachers because obviously they're the ones who know the material the best. And then I'll bring that recommendation to Tim and you. So.
I guess my assumption would be everybody's gonna like what they just piloted, so how
Well, that is exactly what I thought, Julie, too.
Yeah.
I really wanted to structure the pilot so that you could teach both. And I tried very hard to do that, but it just didn't work out schedule-wise. There's, different modes of writing, and the way each program was scheduled, it wouldn't have worked out to swap it. And I tried very hard because I wanted teachers to teach both of them. So instead what we're doing is facilitating some observations. So the coaches will go in so that they can watch their partner teacher teach the other program that they're doing. Teachers are swapping so that they teach at least like maybe a week of the other program. And then our monthly meetings are spent kind of evaluating our criteria. So when we're talking about mentor texts, both groups bring their mentor texts, they talk about with their colleagues, here's what I've seen, here's what they've seen. So we're trying our best to educate each other on the program they're not piloting.
So did people get to pick which group they were in, or did you end up having
Not
to assign?
necessarily.
Okay.
But I did have a lot of eager piloters. I mean, people, I really didn't need to tap a lot of people on the shoulder. People really wanted to try the materials. Mark.
And how did these 2 get selected?
So we kind of looked at what was out there from various publishers. We looked at what Dane County or our benchmark districts were using. Then we have a group called the Literacy Leadership Team, so that's the chair, coordinators, a rep per grade level. So, and Tim and some of the principals, and we went on site visits where they were using both of these materials before we decided.
Okay.
So that's K-6. 7-12 has been doing a lot of great work with writing also. They have written essential learner outcomes from the Common Core for all of the modes and all of their grades. And on that document also, they've identified common assessments. They've also defined specific terms that they're going to use with students and the definitions, so they have that continuity across their courses.
And then do they share that like with social studies teachers or other core content areas
right
that may
now-
be doing writing? And
Right now, it's been specific ELA based on the modes that they're doing.
So is this sort of the unpacking
Yeah.
that's part of the
Yep.
PLC
Yep.
concept?
Yep. So the last area is disciplinary literacy. I mentioned that I meet with these literacy leadership teams, which are the chair, the coaches, coordinators. Marcy Peters-Felice is the 7-12 liaison. And so we met and talked about kind of the next area that 7-12 wanted to really investigate. And disciplinary literacy is something that 712's been working on for a while, but they really wanted to kind of renew their focus in this area. So I have a definition there for you from Wisconsin for disciplinary literacy. It's really kind of merging the experiences and skills from a content area into those literacy skills. So the middle school staff developed a survey that they gave to departments, and based on that information, they've been planning some next steps for PLCs and staff meetings in order to talk a little bit about how they can support those departments in working on their disciplinary literacy goals. And then we do have quite a few staff attending several different workshops at UW-Madison, specifically about writing across the curriculum. So there's just a brief glimpse of some of the bigger projects that we're working on. So our next steps, I'll continue to work with those leadership groups on their level-specific initiatives. We'll complete that K-6 writing pilot and plan the implementation. We're going to be expanding our coaching to 712, and you'll hear more about the curriculum in May. Any other questions?
I think it's, in the years I've been on the board, I think it's, I continue to be impressed with the continuous improvement that exists in all of our areas, and literacy in particular, because that's an area that, you know, spans all areas as well. And I kudos to everybody who's always involved in this, because, I mean, bringing in new programs, and when it comes to, you know, even the public saying, well, what does that mean about my kid if they're not a part of this? I mean, it works. So, I mean, the process is one that's tough to understand. I encourage parents, if we have any questions, to, you know, ask teachers. But it's impressive, the work that's going on, and when you know, and even the use of coaches and stuff, which is something that's very different than that existed years ago. And I just applaud the work of the curriculum department as they continue to, you know, work in all areas of instruction in terms of improving student performance in areas, and trying some of these new models, and not just the ones, I mean, giving some great thought into choosing which ones, and doing, you know, some due diligence and research, and follow up and measuring the achievement as well, which is, you know, even some of the newer stuff, even if that's wonderful. So, yay, good job.
Amy's done a great job leading this whole initiative, that whole leadership literacy team, and all the people that are involved in the collaboration of it. She's done a phenomenal job with it. So it's really been fun to watch the process go and to see where we're at today. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much. And next we have multi-level system of support. Janet. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So I'm here tonight to update you on PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, and that's really just one aspect of our multi-level system of support structure that we have in Waunakee. So I am also very excited to talk about this. This is one of my passion areas here. So really tonight I'll be talking about the relationship of PBIS and our multi-level system of support to our strategic plan. I'll provide you again kind of with the framework for what a multi-level system of support is, remind you of the overview of PBIS, talk about really the importance of data throughout this entire process, and then really discuss the current work and continued work as we move through PBIS. So as you can see, it is under the section of student services in the strategic plan, although like all of these, they really function throughout the entire strategic plan. So PBIS and multi-level systems of support, it's a lot of shared work throughout all of our buildings in the district. So this, again, the last time I think I was in front of you talking about this, I showed this same graphic, and this really is the common symbol for a multi-level system of support. And as Mark alluded to before with RTI, that's sort of the academic side when we're talking about the different levels of support that we provide students. What I'm talking about in the work that we're doing to move forward with PBIS is really on the behavior side of the triangle. And so just as an overview and reminder, this really is a cumulative model of support. So at the bottom of that triangle is really the supports instruction for all students. And when I say all, I mean every student in the district receives some kind of universal instruction, both in academics and in social emotional learning. So that really is the bottom of the triangle. Then it kind of blends up into some students may not really be able to access or make as much progress as we would want them to with just that universal instruction. So in addition to the universal instruction, and I want to make sure I highlight that, it's not instead of, in addition to that universal instruction, they may also get some supplementary support services or instruction, and that really is about 5 to 10% of our population of students. And then as we continue up, when we're talking about, again, our multiple levels of support in both of these areas, there are a few students who, even with all of the universal instruction and some supplemental supports, they need to have a little bit more intensive, individualized, targeted interventions, really. So that sort of is our model. And again, because we are pretty well versed in the academic side of RTI, it has been a great fit to kind of slip over to the behavior side and really set up that system and that structure, because we're able to draw a lot of comparisons for staff when we're talking about how we're creating this system. So again, you know, reminding you that 6 years ago we started this journey. Doesn't feel like that long ago, but in some ways it does. Heritage Intermediate and the middle school were the first 3 of our buildings who were trained in that Tier 1 or that universal level. They went on to be trained in Tier 2, which is the middle of that triangle with some. And then it just became clear over the last couple of years, as I shared with you last year, that it was just a great model and system, and instead of reinventing the wheel and trying to really develop the systems in this area, we last year kind of brought all of our buildings together and we went through our Tier 1 or universal training again. So at this point, again, just to remind you, all of our buildings are now trained in Tier 1 PBIS, and then 3 of our buildings have gone on to Tier 2, so Heritage Intermediate and the middle school. So I just wanted to highlight the key features of each of those tiers, and then I'll summarize where we've gone with this and what our main focus areas have been. So Tier 1, again, the bottom of that triangle, really the universal instruction for social emotional learning. The key features that we've spent a lot of time working on over this last year with all of our buildings is really defining the behavioral expectations that we have for kids. So it's understanding that each building is unique, and although there's a lot of overlap in what we expect of every student in Waunakee at each of our buildings, each of the schools really got a chance to define what it is that they're looking for in terms of social emotional learning and behavior in their own buildings. The second step of that was really teaching and practicing those behavioral expectations, and that's something that we hadn't always done in a real systematic way. And this has probably been the most successful or the biggest eye-opening aspect of PBIS in Tier 1 is really that if we want the students to behave and learn, we need to teach, just like academics, and that's where that parallel between academics and behavior is really successful. We also spend a lot of time talking about acknowledging behavioral success, correcting behavioral error, and really using data to inform. And you know, we can say that that universal level is for all students. I really like to say that it's for every student, because no matter if they're a student with a disability, a student who speaks a different language, any type of student, that universal is really for every one of them. So this is where the majority of our work has been spent in the last couple of years as an entire district. Tier 2 then, and again, we have those 3 of our buildings who are formally trained in Tier 2. Those key features are really how do we supplement and connect to that universal teaching. So those 5 to 10% of the kids that are just not making the progress that we want to see with what our behavioral expectations have been, what can we do to both ensure that those skills were taught to fluency universally, but also add on a layer of some targeted teaching of behavioral expectations. And what this has really allowed us to do in those Tier 2 trained buildings is look at the adult responses and really expand what those responses are and how we're correcting some of those errors. And it really all goes back to how are we teaching, maybe those students need it to be taught in a little different way. And again, really using data to monitor and inform those types of interventions that we have at the Tier 2 level for PBIS. Tier 3 then, although we are not formally trained, we have a lot of professional knowledge and resources on how to help and support the kids who may fall into that top of the triangle. Those very few students who, even with our universal instruction and some targeted supports, still need something a little bit more. And this just really becomes a lot more of an individualized support team, where you may have heard the term wraparound services, where we're really bringing in families, community resources to really help those students who need something a little bit more intensive around their social emotional learning and behavior in our school settings. So again, this is a few students, and we have a lot of resources to help them, and within this model, it's just helped us to frame and identify those students and families who might need a little bit something more. So the use of data is really important in PBIS, and this has really probably the biggest difference in our conversation around behavior and social emotional learning has been in how we are documenting behavioral error and behavioral successes. So the data that we're using is different behavioral referrals. We do some screeners in 3rd through 9th grade, which we've discussed a little bit previously. Teacher referrals, attendance, grades. I think we've talked about health office visits. There are some students who come for legitimate reasons, and there are other students who come, not that they're not legitimate reasons, but they're coming because they're trying to avoid something or they're anxious. And so we have great health office staff who's able to really help us look at those types of students and what additional supports they might need. We've discussed EduClimber before. This is our data visualization tool, and I wasn't really expecting, but we have used it a lot more frequently this year than we have before. Every one of our schools now is documenting, to some degree, behavioral referrals in EduClimber. So we are able to very quickly and easily take a look at the students who are making those behavioral errors and having some challenges. We have spent a lot of time administratively talking about what a minor behavior is and what a major behavior is. So we have both of those lists, and we've spent a lot of time and continue to spend time really defining those so that as a district we have some consistent data on behavior. One more thing about EduClimber, we have all of our school psychologists have become trained as trainers, and so we continue to really build the capacity of our staff to really look at that data and understand it so that we can make the best decisions about our interventions. So currently, we have, all of our buildings have an internal coach for PBIS and great leadership teams. I've spent a lot of time with these teachers and staff, and they are amazingly committed to this work and have done a ton of work to move this forward. We have spoken previously about a possible stipend for internal coaches. These are teachers who are volunteering to head these committees, and they have done a tremendous amount of work in really leading those initiatives. So I think it'll continue to be a topic of conversation. All of our buildings, as I said, have been trained in Tier 1. 3 of them have been trained in Tier 2. Our biggest success really has been having some common language for those expectations in each of the buildings. And those, if you visit schools or classrooms, you may see it's like a matrix. It's like a grid that has kind of their expectations down the side and then all of the different environments. And then they have really formalized and operationalized what they're looking for from student behavior in each of those cells. So it may be hallway, what does it look like to be respectful in the hallway? And then they would, each of the buildings have identified that with student input, teacher input, parent input. So they're really great documents that kind of live and breathe and change throughout the schools. We have spent a lot of time talking about what are our instructional response to teach and correct behavior, really changing the focus from a consequence that's given to what is our teaching response, especially at the universal level. And then really identifying some of those targeted supports at the tier 2 level that again focuses on teaching instead of just providing a consequence. We have seen a tremendous amount of success and response from students now that they kind of understand what they're supposed to be doing. Our continued work is really looking at always making sure that our data is good data, and we're using a variety of sources to really monitor the effectiveness of our work. Always trying to increase the staff knowledge and support implementation. And then really importantly, connecting to other initiatives and programming to generalize the learning. We are always talking about how this model mirrors many other things that we're doing in the district, and using that same language has been really beneficial. We also continue to participate in ongoing staff training and learning in all 3 of the tiers. A couple of our internal coaches, even though we just went through our tier 1 training, are going to a booster to kind of networks with some other area districts and boost their knowledge. And then just last Friday, we had a tier 2 booster where our tier 2 teams were right here in this room, really going back and refreshing on what they need to do. And after we've been doing this for a while, setting new goals as we continue to progress and improve. So, Mark.
So 2 questions. One, I'm aware in the past, most buildings had an intervention team.
Yes.
Do those still exist, or has this replaced them for all practical purposes?
That's a great question. Our tier 2 teams have been slowly replacing those intervention teams. And I have sat in over the years both intervention teams and tier 2 teams, and I can say that the difference really is that we are a lot more focused on data and all of the students instead of just coming and talking about a few students. So I have seen that to be a real positive change.
Okay, and then the second question, with all the, and I mean this generally, with all the data that's now accumulating, plus the coaching training of staff as to how they articulate expectations to kids, can we statistically see that there are fewer aberrant behaviors from those without emotional mental problems, that things are, I mean, you know, so we're seeing fewer problems universally without that obviously those
Yeah.
collective groups there.
Yes. So collecting data on behavior is ever-changing and difficult. I think that generally speaking, what we can say has been the biggest success is that our students are much more able to express and understand what the expectation is, and they have been able to really model great behavior for each other because they understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Again, anecdotally, I think that we have a lot of evidence to support that there are fewer of kind of those lower level behaviors. Time will tell as we continue to get better and better data, and as more schools use our data system more consistently. But the biggest change that I can see is that we are able to intervene and provide supports to kind of those tier 2 students in a much more efficient way. Where it used to be that if a student had some problem behavior, we right away started talking about a special ed referral, or that there was something, you know, with a student that we needed to identify. Now we're really looking at, as a staff, what can we do to support that student, and we have had tremendous success in changing kind of those tier 2
So more
students'
proactive
behaviors.
than reactive.
Exactly. Yep.
I would add, Mark, I think some of the work that Janet's done with working on the language, because you're getting at the
Right.
data pieces. In order to have good data, which is what Janet talked about, you need to make sure you're using the same language consistently.
Mhm.
So there's been a lot of conversation about, well, how do we classify these different pieces, so that we can then collect data that can then be universal. I think there's been a big help to that, but there's been a lot of work with Janet, the coaches, those leadership teams at the building level, to really start to really work on that. And that's been a huge first step, in addition to the trainings, and I agree with Janet, just as far as how we've been able to kind of focus on the programming aspects at the other tiers.
One question, as it relates to tier one, and sometimes when individuals hear behavioral expectations, they saw, at least in the public, you're gonna say, well, they're, expected to little automatons, behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
I mean, really what we want to be doing is encouraging self-expression that's respectful for everyone. So when you talk about hallway behavior, whatever they are.
Mhm.
My question is, when it comes to communicating expectations, and the example of the grid is a good way, how is this communicated just to adults or to the parents? Because sometimes students will come into the schools with expectations of what appropriate behavior is or isn't, that is different than what we are teaching in our schools.
Mhm.
And how does that work, or kind of, I won't say like outreach, for the basic, the tier one stuff.
Yep.
Which is, and we're not, doing anything to discourage personal expression and, individuality, and
Right.
nurturing and all that, but their behaviors.
Yes, that's a good question. First, I'll start by saying that most of the schools, kind of their general categories of how they're defining behavior is talking about being safe, being respectful, and being responsible. So within those three categories, we're defining what that looks like across environments. In that, we do a lot of parent communication through just the building newsletters. At the beginning of the year at open houses, we really talk about what those expectations are. There's a lot of visuals in the schools. So parents, we even have some parents who are on those committees, on our tier one committees. And it's a goal that we have to continue to include parents in that discussion as we feel like we have our own ducks in a row.
And I think that's important to emphasize. It's being safe and respectful and
responsible.
And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
As a parent, I hear it with my kids. You hear the PBIS language with the kids talking about. My elementary child was talking about playground expectations.
Mhm.
Well, that was PBIS. It was teaching, how do you play Foursquare? What are the rules? So as opposed to just throwing them out there and let them do whatever they choose. It was trying to teach those things so that they knew what the expectations were. And you could, just hearing the language throughout, from a parent's perspective, it's maybe always not PBIS piece with that title to it, but it's definitely teaching behavioral expectations, and I hear that just permeating through the kids coming home.
And teaching cooperation, listening, respect.
That's
Those
right.
are all really good things, life skills.
Yeah, and I'll say one additional thing. The way that we're teaching it to students is multi-level. I mean, it's varied. So we've got, at the intermediate school, they're doing assemblies where it's student-led, where they have, a topic of the week that they're talking about and really honing in on with the students. They have student council has made videos, teaching staff has made videos to show what does it look like to be, responsible in the classroom. What does it look like to, be responsible in the hallway? At the beginning of the year, a lot of the schools really show those videos, and they take time in the first days of school to practice and show what does that mean, what does that look like. We're also starting to work on, as part of our continued work, really how to embed those skills in that teaching within the classroom lessons. So for example, in the ELA block, what does that look like? What can a teacher do to say and remind students what it looks like to be responsible and respectful? More at the middle school and high school level, what does it look like to advocate for yourself, to ask for help, to really embed all of those skills within the content area as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Janet? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great job, Janet, thank you.
And our third presentation tonight is on our wellness and our benefits program. Connie, Steve.
Joan, I'll begin. So I'm going to partner with Connie Beth tonight. We're going to take pieces of this presentation and share it with you.
Before I begin, I do not want anyone to panic. I'm sure you saw in board book the length of this thing. It took over an hour to really go through this with the district's insurance committee. We are not intending to do that this evening. What we are intending to do is to provide a very high-level overview of this topic to make sure that as board members you are informed as to where we are in this process. So you will note we're going to be skipping through sections of the presentation in order to really get that message across to you tonight. To begin with, the sections that we're going to be covering on this presentation, how it relates to our strategic plan, some information for you on the insurance committee. The results of a staff survey are included for your review. The health insurance benefit request proposal process, and then really finish up with a wellness clinic update. So the first slide again just shares with you where this is on the district strategic planning process. Again, we're under the human resources section. So under the human resources section, you'll see the applicable areas related to this topic. Moving on, for the background, I think it's important to keep this in mind. The agreement that we have, which is completing its 4th year with Dean and SSM, expires on June 30th of 2018. So the most significant purchasing decision that we will make this year is in regards to health insurance. This is near a $6 million expenditure when you combine the district cost with our employee cost that they contribute. So by far, this will be the most significant financial decision that you will be faced with this year. And you will be seeing that coming back to you in the spring. In addition to that, the wellness clinic trial has been paired up to match that same time frame, which is again 6/30 of 2018. The process this year of really evaluating our health insurance and wellness clinic is really led by the insurance committee. And just a reminder, the insurance committee is a group of individuals that include representation from the school board. So your school board reps are Joan and Julie, administration, and members of the staff. We do have some new insurance committee members this year. So our teacher reps, Todd Shuka and Ken Penfield, are new to the insurance committee. And John Gillis, the custodial and maintenance rep, is new to the committee. So you would see up on the screen here who are all the individuals that are participating in the insurance committee process this year. In the next section, what I want to share with you is that as an insurance committee, we felt it was extremely critical to engage our staff in a survey prior to the request for proposal process being distributed. There were a number of questions that we had in that survey designed to understand the feedback from those that are actually participating in these programs. The survey was distributed to all staff eligible for insurance. Not everyone takes our insurance who's eligible, but everyone who is eligible was asked to participate. The sections that they participated in varied depending on whether you take the insurance or whether you don't. Because obviously if you don't take the insurance, how would you comment on certain sections like your own evaluation of the plan that we offer? And then so as we went through the development of this PowerPoint for the insurance committee, every single question that was asked to the staff was identified along with the response. I'm only going to point to a couple of them that are very important for you to connect to the recommendations for the request for proposal. But as a broad overview, we were extremely pleased with the participation from the staff in this survey. This really shows the engagement of our staff and the willingness to participate when we put this information out and seek feedback. The response rate that we received, Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, to slide 8. The response rate that we received, you can see in the lower right-hand corner, based on feedback from the committee, we added the total eligible people and the total percentage of the responses. Is really nothing short of outstanding for a survey. You just don't see this kind of response on a survey, especially going out pre-holidays when people have a lot on their mind. So we can feel very confident that the results that we have in front of us tonight really do represent a broad spectrum of the staff who are participating and eligible for insurance. So next I'm going to ask Rebecca to slide quite a few slides ahead for us to go all the way to slide number 23. So slide 23 shows the response that we receive from our staff on what carriers would you like to see the district consider in our search. The provider systems you can access were listed below. The main reason for asking this question was to understand what type of a willingness is there from our staff to engage in a full search regarding this topic. Based on seeing the results of this question, the insurance committee agreed unanimously that it should be our intent to send the request for proposal out to all of the carriers identified on the screen. We do not expect to receive responses from all 5 insurance plans listed on the screen, but we are going to be engaging the 5 that we are aware of that might be interested in providing a proposal or response to a Dane County public school. So this expresses an openness and a willingness from our staff to take a look. Since we are going out to proposal, this expresses an interest in taking a look to see at what options are available to us in the marketplace.
Steve,
yes.
You know, let's say we make the decision that the health clinic is good. Is that included in the proposal, or is it a standalone?
Right, so that's an excellent question. I'll come back to that in just a minute to show how the RFP is designed to make sure that we are looking at both of those things that you mentioned. So I'll come back to your question in just a couple of slides. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind moving on to slide 26. So one of the aspects that's important for us to continue to evaluate is the wellness services that we're offering to our staff. We originally began down this journey with the Dean system with really a new model for trying to encourage and you know, basically provide opportunities for engagement around the topic of wellness. We began that with the introduction of a nurse liaison to our district. However, as you know, we now also have a wellness clinic that was started since. One thing that was important for us to understand is in evaluating both of those services, what kind of feedback are we receiving from our staff? From this question, our staff is indicating that between the nurse liaison and the wellness clinic, there seems to be potential crossover of services. As a result of this, the insurance committee is recommending that in the request for proposal that we no longer seek nurse liaison services. So we don't feel like we need to be offering both the nurse liaison and a nurse practitioner in a wellness clinic, and want to encourage having one individual available for our staff to address their healthcare needs. So that's slide 26. And now I want to move on to slide 28, Rebecca. Slide 28, which is question 21 on our survey, tells a very important story. we have been moving further down the spectrum of engagement on the topic of wellness. One of the questions we had as an insurance committee is how would our staff respond to continuing to move further down the spectrum of offering wellness opportunities. This response rate indicated that 83% of our staff said they are willing to continue going down that spectrum, continue looking at future participation in additional required wellness activities to obtain the maximum district contribution. This is a very strong or very high response rate. As we know, a lot of these wellness programs sometimes introduce some paperwork and procedures and other things and other steps you have to go through. What this indicates to us is that our engagement of our staff along the wellness path is being reciprocated with a willingness to participate in that. So this was a positive response, and it's allowing us to continue to engage the medical systems as well as the insurance carriers on how we can all work together cooperatively to improve what we are offering to our staff, to really ramp up our efforts in this area. So we found this to be a very positive response. On the next slide, as we get into the health insurance request proposal, this gets into the information about what are we about to be sending out to the marketplace. As discussed a few minutes ago, our intention is to release this to all 5 carriers that we know that are responding at least to, or have the potential to respond to our request for proposal. The next slide, as we talked about, we are suggesting consolidating our wellness efforts in our nurse practitioner, moving away from the nurse liaison model. We are looking at opportunities for additional wellness activities and to make the programs that we have right now work better. The next slide, this is an important one, and Al Yeager, our insurance consultant, is here. If there's questions on it, I know he'd be happy to answer those. The recommendation from our insurance consultant is that our request for proposal process maintains our existing health insurance benefits and plan design. And then the health plan alternatives, so design plan alternatives, may be considered by the insurance committee after the proposals have been received. So we don't want to start with offering up an additional copay. We don't want to start with changes to our plan. We want to have a response based on the plan that we have in place today, and then allow the insurance committee to respond to the proposals that we have received. And if you have any questions about how that works, I'm sure that when we get to the end of the presentation, Al can help with that. Or Jack, go ahead.
No, I guess, so we start with our existing plan, and then there's companies that put alternative A, B, and C. How do you pick alternative A, B, or C? Are you picking based on the bid that was submitted at our existing, and then if you like that company, then you can offer these alternatives, or?
So Al, would you mind just explaining what the decrements that you've described and in the different responses you get back, and so that we would be able to know what different options may exist during the bidding process?
Sure. So as you have the 3 to 5 carriers side by side with their proposals, you see, you know, again, with like to like plan design, and you can narrow down, say, the final 2 that make sense from a financial standpoint. The next question is, okay, what decrements, like different copay to prescription, different, one of the things we're asking as a group of, call it 45 school districts in the Dean and UW footprint, we're asking them to do some step to the table on some more creative prescription drug transparency and plan designs. And that's not just for the insurance, that's for the health system and the providers to have better communication on effectiveness and options, et cetera. And so those are some of the plan designs we're asking for on the side. And, you know, as we see what they come up with from a creativity and effectiveness options, we can kind of pick and choose when we have the final as a collective group, what makes the most sense based on, again, the options on the table.
So you get three proposals. And you like, you know, proposal 1A is low bid, but you like this plan design of, you know, some creative option on proposal 3. How do you know, do you
How do you
pick
pick and
low
choose?
1? Yeah, do you pick low 1 as the low bid or the most responsive, and then say, okay, look what, you know, proposal 3 did here. Can you do something like that? You know, how do you negotiate? You know, this is a bid process.
There are parameters at being a public entity. There are parameters of what you can and can't do.
Right.
I think the standard is you select who are your finalists. So if it's 2 or 3 or whatever, you have your finalists. And then B, once you have a sense of what you like for plan options, it's appropriate to go back to those finalists and say, here are the final tweaks we'd like to look at from a plan design, or changes we'd like to have from a plan design. And you can pit them against each other in that process. And say, you know, here are the final prescription options. And frankly, it's not a commodity, so it's a little more difficult because you're dealing with providers, right? So that part comes into the equation in the committee discussions as well.
Al, if you could just stay there for the next slide as well.
Sure.
The next slide really gets into your previous question, Jack. So this is the framework for the request for proposal. Given the fact that we have a wellness clinic model, so we're the only public school in Dane County that has one, we need to work with Al and his team to put out a little bit of a different framework for how we want to try to receive proposals back. So we're breaking it up into 3 broad categories. Number 1 is a proposal on a health insurance benefit program with no clinic model. So we're asking for the carriers to respond with a straight insurance-based model. The second one is a proposal with an integrated clinic model. So as you know, right now we have an integrated clinic model with Dean SSM. So that's the type of clinic we have right now. The third option is a proposal for a health insurance benefit program with an independent wellness clinic model. The reason for this is we need to put ourselves in the best position possible for making a decision. And as an example, UW currently does not have a wellness clinic in place with any public entities like a school district in Dane County. They have started a wellness clinic with Sub-Zero in Fitchburg, but if UW is not ready to offer a wellness clinic to a public school district, we would be forced to exclude them if we want to continue the concept, unless we are also obtaining independent wellness clinic model quotes. So it puts the insurance committee in the best position that they possibly can be in to look at the full set of options. So when we have the responses coming back to us, the insurance committee, first of all, will have the full range of potential responses, and secondly, we will have the full range of the spectrum available to us to look at. So we are trying to make sure the committee has the information available to examine the broadest range of possibilities that are currently on the market. Al, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think you nailed it.
Mark?
So does courts have a financial incentive to provide a better price if we're contracting privately with the health clinic?
With an independent?
Yes.
Do they have an incentive? to include a clinic in the equation. You know, where the incentive is on their part is the behavior changes that are starting to take place. So, in large part, the whole interest on the model, the clinic models, whether it's integrated or independent, is changing the curve.
Health
Changing behavior, and there's three ways to lower cost, right? Pay less for the claims, pay less of the claims, or have fewer claims. This is focused on having fewer claims.
Before we turn it over to Connie with the wellness clinic, just one point to share with you all. Al's firm is leading a group effort through many, many school districts in Middleton on, I think it's February 1st, that we are participating in to bring in the carriers to conduct some extensive interview processes and back and forth with them. We are really focused on a variety of topics, health and wellness being one of them, technology being one of them, to really engage the carriers so the conversation isn't necessarily with a presentation to us. It's where we are really engaging them on such topics as the health risk assessment that we now have as a requirement here to maintain the district's contribution. We want to have a good conversation with the carriers about how we can integrate those health risk assessment data into the medical record system. Instead of it being a totally separate system, how do we make these wellness programs that we currently have more effective, more engaging, and more proactive than what we're doing today? So we're really excited to be participating in that effort on February 1st, and we are continuing to try to lead the conversation. In the fact that we have other districts joining us, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Fort Atkinson, and others, it really improves our ability to reach the carriers and to receive the responses from them that we're looking for. So if there's any other questions on this topic, otherwise we'd like Connie jump up on the clinic. Okay, go ahead.
I just had one comment as it relates to the survey question about the nurse liaison value provision to the district. I mean, I know the majority was no, but it was 43 to 57%. And the total number of responses were greater than the number of currently participating in our insurance program. But that's not to suggest that the position isn't relevant, but I think it's important to understand why the yeses are yes and why the nos were no, so that when there is a change in perceived service or a perceived resource that's available, that there's an understanding of, you know, number one, what the difference is between this and an individual affiliate with a clinic, but because maybe there are a lot of people who don't use the clinic, who don't use our insurance, who are tapping. It's just an understanding of making sure that, you know, there's a fair number of folks who see value, understanding what that means,
Sure.
so that there's, it doesn't result in an unintended consequence or misinformed decisions or something. So
Sure.
I don't know how the committee does it, but by just saying, no, we're not gonna do it without an explanation or an understanding of why the no's were no's and yeses were yeses, sometimes just clarifying things can take care of it before there's a reaction.
Are there other school districts in the area that are starting to look at the wellness plan that, you know, as you talk around the area?
Al, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. Connie, you can certainly speak to your participation in, you know, numerous districts in the areas that are engaging in this discussion. They're not as far along as we are here, but they've recognized this on multiple fronts, and probably the most significant is a cultural front where they see, you know, the next generation having so much interest in wellness being a focus in terms of attracting and retaining.
I do get a lot of questions from colleagues in other school districts. Middleton and Sun Prairie are particularly interested at this point. others are coming along. I will talk with you. I just have a few highlights I want to point out about the wellness clinic. Again, I'm not covering every slide, so I'll jump around a little bit. And I'd like to start, Rebecca, with slide 18. When we opened the wellness clinic, there were a lot of decisions that we had to make upon opening that we didn't know from past history if they were the right decisions or not, so we just had to give it our best guess. And one of those decisions was, what hours will the clinic be open? We knew we had the nurse practitioner, Suzanne, for 40 hours a week, and we had to decide which 40 hours. So we have the clinic open from 10 in the morning until 6:30 p.m. And we told the staff that after the clinic was open for a while, we would do a survey, and we wanted to hear back from them if we were meeting their needs. So here's where we got their feedback, and I was really happy with the results. It's pretty clear to us that at least for the reasonable future, we're going to stick with the hours as we established them. Rebecca, if we could jump now to slide 27. And this is the only other slide on the survey that I wanted to touch on. We asked staff members if they felt it was important that the district would continue to offer a wellness clinic. And you can see that the majority of respondents said yes. We anticipated this answer, and we were happy to see that the results showed what we thought they would. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the data that we have about utilization at the clinic. And slide 35. Dean provides us with a pretty comprehensive report on a quarterly basis. Their quarters, quarter 2, for example, is April, May, and June. So we first opened the clinic in April. Our first comprehensive report was quarter 2. More recently, we're sharing with you the results of quarter 3. And on this slide, we just put both results from both quarters so you can see how things have changed over time since the clinic has been open. So the first column there, the percent of eligible members who visited the clinic. The first quarter we were open, which was quarter 2, was 13.2%. And you can see in quarter 3, it's looking quite a bit better at 21%. We do not have the comprehensive report for quarter 4 yet. We anticipate that probably later this month, early in February, and we will share that information when we have it, but we know that the numbers are continuing to go up.
I think the one problem that's always bothered me with that first number is the fact that we're saying the number of eligible members who went to the clinic. But it's not in relationship to the number of eligible members who went anywhere else. For example, I doubt 100% of our eligible members went to a doctor at all in quarter 2. Right. So we don't know how many went to a doctor that wasn't at the wellness clinic versus going to the wellness clinic. We're just seeing a total. In a weird way, it has no meaning. Because if only, let's say in quarter 2, only 15% of people went to any doctor, we're doing great. But in quarter 3, maybe 50% went. We actually did worse in quarter 3 than quarter 2. We have no idea whether 13 to 21 meant anything. And I think we're going to have to figure that out to some point to decide, in the end, how long do we keep this going. I do think the numbers are getting better, which would seem to, on the face of it, say something, but we really don't know. Mm-hmm. So that number has to somehow have a meaning to the number of people who went to any clinic before we can decide if it's.
But if you look at it, what's the difference between percentage of eligible, and then you got total visits. Total visits is quarter 2 is 229, went up to 231.
Yeah, that didn't make sense to me either.
And the two columns are not necessarily connected. They don't flow.
More people doing single visits. The other one was more people doing multiple visits.
And total visits means somebody could have come in to see Suzanne, we'll call it a doctor appointment, Some came in to see the nurse for a flu shot or a blood pressure check only, and some came in for lab work. So that's all inclusive, but the percents and the numbers aren't tied together.
So should it be total number of appointments? You know, because if you go there.
I think that you could say this total number of appointments and total visits are the same thing.
So basically what you had, Jack, was in the second quarter, you had 13.2% of the eligible staff went, with 229 visits. You could probably say some of those folks went more than once.
Yes.
The other ones may have been more, you had more of a percentage of the staff going for the number of
More
visits.
single visits.
Yes. And Dave, to your point, I'm glad Al's here because he's really good about helping us work with Dean to get more information, to get the information we want in the way we want it. So we'll follow up with Dean on that.
So today's question, since we are a dean school district, do we have the data on how many of our eligible people went to a dean doctor, the dean clinic?
We absolutely get that data in terms of claims. And it's just a matter of getting them to report it in a format that will be meaningful.
It will get better because Epic is up now. I mean, we were not on an Epic system. And now that Epic is up, it will actually happen. That's why when we say things, it does happen every month once it happens. I mean, it's just the process of the switch because we are in a different system when we were with once the Epic system, because I'm in the Epic system right now, it will happen every month. So it will be boom, 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 and you'll have a comparable number. The quarter thing is difficult for me too, because when I look at it, I go, that's not how I'm used to looking at the data over time. It will improve. The data will, I don't know if the numbers will improve, but I mean the data location will improve. And I expect the numbers to improve.
So then having what you just said, I mean, if quarter data, regardless of the type of data, maybe we shouldn't be reporting things quarterly, it's monthly or whatever, whatever is appropriate for it.
Right, it's difficult because we made a transition, I made the transition before, and you weren't in that meeting when I turned all bright red. But because it's useless, I mean, to a certain extent. And then once you get the Epic data that data is actually fairly reliable data. And this, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think we were actually counting at time. It's just a different way of sourcing data.
Well, the key to it all is you just need your people going here if it's things that they can go here for.
Correct.
There's gonna be still certain things you're gonna have to go see your doctor and this place can't handle, and that's all what that is. But there's times they should be going here to help our position versus there, because we're paying.
It saves everybody money.
So you can see from the third and fourth column that of the staff members and their families that used the clinic, the satisfaction was very high. On the next slide, 36, there's some numbers for you that I'll touch on. This top one, gross retail fee savings for third quarter. What we're talking about here is if someone walked into the clinic off the street, had no insurance plan, what is the retail cost they would have paid for the services that were offered in our wellness clinic during quarter two? It's for an illustration. It's not really relevant for us. The more relevant number is the contracted savings. So for quarter three, that number, $21,556, that is a real number of claims that would have been run through our plan if our staff members went into the Dean Clinic as opposed to went into our wellness clinic for the services. So that took place in our clinic and did not run through as a claim.
I'm sorry, are you, so if all those visits in third quarter had gone, not to the wellness clinic, it would have cost us $21,000 out of.
In claims, yes.
So the fact we're paying $19,000 a month for the clinic, I hate to say it, makes this look awful.
Not that great.
Break even.
No, we're not even breaking even, that's a whole quarter. It cost us $60,000.
They get it back
to
in
run the
1 month
clinic.
what they bill us.
Or is this savings after the cost of the clinic?
No, it's
It's
not
not.
after the
Okay.
cost of the clinic.
That's not pretty,
No.
considering we got 21% of our members to go to that thing
Yeah.
already. I don't see where you're gonna get to a level that's gonna offset triple the cost.
Steve, what was the average increase we had the last 4 years? 5%, right?
Well, that's the next, I got written down here. You said we were under 5% by slide 34. Whereas before it was usually 8 and 9%, but we were locked into 5%. Where are we at now? It says it's under 5, does that mean it's 5?
That's what we're going out to bid for, but I would submit that this isn't where you're saving the money. Where you
It's
save
5%.
or less.
Right.
I mean,
Well-
and so, in large part, this is a cost shift. This is saying the clinic had these claims instead of going to an outside clinic. Cost shift is, all right, you paid less for the claims. That was one of the 3 categories of saving money. Pay less of the claims, pay less for the claims, or have fewer claims. The whole purpose of engaging more and more of the membership at an earlier and earlier stage, and this is something we've talked about on multiple occasions on multiple fronts. You know, healthcare historically had been a reactive delivery model. We're trying to create something where you have 95% of the staff participating in biometrics proactively, right? It's just something that everyone's participating with. Now their dependents are starting to participate. And then you you fill in the gap of, instead of, once a year physical or annual checkup, you're starting to impact behavior changes, and statistically 50% of your health status is your behavior. You're eating, you're drinking, you're exercise, smoking, whatever. So the moving of the needle starts being demonstrated in the proposal responses, and the cost shift is one thing. The claims as a whole will be the bigger piece of the equation.
That sounds good, but I guess I still was, Dean is billing us back roughly in 1 month what we're saving in 3.
They're billing you back in 1 month what you're saving in 3 in the
Correct.
cost shift piece.
Correct.
I mean, by the
I'm
time
not
you
gonna
get,
argue that.
by
I
the
don't
time
know
you
if
get to
anyone
the end
would.
of the year, you're looking at $160,000.
So I was led to believe, or I understood, or I had hoped, or however you want to say it, that for Dean to truly partner with us in launching this new model, they would have been assuming more of this risk, rather than just counting it all up and billing us back every single month, and delaying all of our savings to some point down the road in the future. I'm disappointed that that bill is so high every month from Dean.
But I think, to that point though, I think what you gotta look at is what, if insurers are looking at, we're doing this, and it's good for our population is healthier, the anticipation would be that the increase in premiums would be lower than other districts of the same size without having this there. So, if you look at, 2 or 3 points, I don't know what the health insurance is going up.
Well,
these
if you
days.
said $6 million, 3 percentage points alone, what's that, 180 grand?
Yeah, but the other thing you're doing is you're changing an attitude for teachers, and you're getting them to change their behavior as well.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have done it, I'm not saying it still isn't all going
But
really,
I
really
think,
well.
I think what we have to do is wait and see what we get back for the bids.
That's
before
right,
we-
it's the
Before we
bids.
really make a claim saying that this is, they're charging us way too much.
I don't think we made that claim. I wanted to make sure I understood the 21,000.
No, I
Which
understand.
is that. Now, if the 5% is significantly below what the other 4 are gonna hit us with, then yeah, you're seeing an effect over there, and you gotta count that too. But I think the biggest thing is you're gonna have in effect, three alternative proposals on each, with and without wellness clinics of different types. That's gonna see an effect, and maybe $160,000 extra for the wellness clinic is worth it, because the percentages on your premium is enough.
And my point is I think we have to wait until the bids come back to see what it looks like. You know.
And quarter four. I mean, quarter three is not yet a high usage time. Quarter four is, I think, just going to be a higher usage time.
This is a new product as well, you know, and you're introducing a new product, and, you know, there's very few products that, you know, become a $100 million company, you know, once you launch it.
I know, I just want to acknowledge all the work that both Connie and Steve did to be very aggressive at every point of the way in pushing Dean, what about this, what about that? It was not Dean raising their hand saying, here's another thing we could do for you.
How do you know that?
It's a perception.
So I know right now is that there will be a vice president in our, I apologize for not doing it. There will be a vice president in Dean, which only does these accounts, not just to schools, to everybody. I mean, this is the waveform. The problem right now is there is no primary care. I mean, I don't exist. I'm a dinosaur, sort of. So without an advocate, you aren't going anywhere. And so what I call it miscare. It happens a lot, in that you go to the urgent care and they send you to ortho, and you go, you didn't have to be at ortho. You needed to be with your primary doc to put the splint on. And this is happening, not just, I know it's happening in all systems. I watch it every day, and it makes me a little, you know, the dollars that are spent on miscare is annoying to me. But I do know that I know there's at least 50 different accounts that are being looked at in Dean alone, and some of them in schools, but many of them are not schools. Many of them are businesses that have come, that have used, I think it's, a place on Dodgeville has a model also, so. Land's End, that's how it is, yeah, so there's coming. So, the process too of like, you can get into this, my belief is that you have a very excellent provider. The 99th percentile is top of that's industry standard there. But the having her available, whether that, at least from the experience, the people I'm talking about, hey, I never get to see you, but I could see her, and then she can call me if she has a problem. Because it's a different version of triaging. I mean, and I don't know what the value of that is to the district, but the difference is mine is that they have to take the appointment that I can give them versus the appointment they can get. You know what I mean? We have opened it up pretty much to a family practice model. I call it the comfort model. I don't want them to have a broken leg and go down the stairs. To Tad for Tall's broken leg. But it's like, if you're comfortable getting there, that is the right person to be there. And then she has done a really good job of organizing Next Care.
Well, and I want to add your name to the list as well, because we'd be sunk without you. And I do know that's helped quite a bit. But what I'm saying is, you know, without all three of these people getting really involved and strongly advocating for our position.
Right, and I think that unfortunately it is sort of a cloud. I mean, I wish it was defined, but I think there's so many people, so many places that you're not going to be alone for very long. It's coming, and it's just where it goes.
Right.
I guess my perspective, like Jack was saying too, is it's too early to tell. I mean, we're in the embryonic stage of the clinic, and to me, it may be a 2-3 year deal before we truly know not just the economic but the health benefit. And to me, we'll have to make that decision, you know, from an economic position probably at some point.
Right, and I think to me, the nurse liaison cost is going to come out because that should have gone into the clinics. I don't know how to subtract that. You know what I mean? But that is the correct move to me. I don't know what the purpose of that was once we got the other person. Because now, if we have the front desk person, the front desk, Maria, is able to say, this is, front entry, and now you have that basic function, and you save that liaison. I should have done the English thing. But as far as the process, there's another price up. So
But I think the other thing too is it'd be great if we could team with like a village, you know, and get those people involved in this.
Right.
You know, you start doing some cost sharing, you know, and now we could drive numbers, you know, to the wellness. So, you know, and this probably isn't gonna happen, you know, anytime soon, but if you have a long-term plan saying, hey, we got this wellness clinic, can we get other organizations, governmental bodies involved? You know, now instead of having 350, you know, maybe you get up to 450 or 500 people that have the capability to use it.
We have talked about that, not deeply analyzed it at this point, but we've talked about it as a possibility in the future. What we want to do right now, as we're still in startup, is expand services, drive our staff there, get things really running smoothly, and then see what kind of excess capacity we have, and then at that point consider other options. I think I'm going to go through my remaining slides, and then I'll open up more for whatever questions you might have. I had Rebecca switch to slide 43. You'll remember maybe when the board approved moving forward with the clinic, we established some key metrics. The first three I'll touch on right now. Patient clinic engagement success, we called it. And our target was 25% of staff would participate or would visit the clinic by March 1st. We are already at 37.8, so we've already exceeded that goal. The second one was 90% of people that visited the clinic would be satisfied, would encounter satisfaction. We have 97.5%, so we've met that goal and exceeded it. For wellness, we targeted, not specific to the clinic, but part of overall staff wellness, 90% of staff were to participate, at least 90%, in the biometric screening. We exceeded that goal, and then from there, we targeted that 5%, at least 5% of staff would visit the clinic to discuss the results of their biometric screening. We have exceeded that goal. Currently, 18.2% of staff have followed up on the results at the clinic. So we feel great about these. And the fourth one is one that we'll be able to look at more closely after we've gone through the RFP process and we get back those bids, and we can look at what is going to be our plan moving forward and what is the impact on premiums with this clinic having been up and running since April. Slide 44, just a few things that are new with the clinic. Flu shots were offered in the clinic this past fall. 260 flu shots were given there. I'm really happy with that number.
So you just solved their sub-problem with 260 flu shots.
Hey, it's all tied together, and it's really difficult to measure, but we're hoping that it all fits. This was not just staff members, it was family members that are on the plan that could come in. And what I really liked about that is it was, I'll say a non-threatening, a really easy opportunity to visit the clinic, see what it looks like, meet Suzanne, and know that it's comfortable, so next time something comes up, they'll go there instead of to a different clinic out there. And then the next slide is just so you can see a memo that I sent out to staff in November, and that was announcing a couple of the big changes that we're really excited about. One was this transition to the EPIC system that Bill was talking about earlier. Now it's seamless. People can go into the clinic, Suzanne can pull up their records, she can enter everything that happened at the visit, so then when they go back to the Dean clinic, because they have to have a follow-up with their primary care doctor or a specialist, everything is all right there at the fingertips. And then the expansion of services. When we started the clinic, we had this list of things that people could go to the clinic for, and they really kind of needed to stick to that list. But we pushed, we worked really hard. There were a few meetings where we had some lengthy conversations about how we needed to open up those services, and finally on December 1st that happened. So again, we don't have much time under our belt since that had happened, but
That's big news.
now we're telling staff members, go to the wellness clinic, we will handle everything we can possibly handle there. If Suzanne feels it cannot be handled, she will refer you back to the appropriate specialist or doctor, wherever. But it's wide open now. We have staff members that are excited about it, and I really am anxious to see how the numbers will change with this. The next slide, as we discussed earlier in the year, our clinic is going to have to move into a new building. We're not excited that we have to move, but we're excited because the new space is going to be absolutely beautiful, even nicer than the one we're in, at no additional cost to the district. So that construction is moving along. They're making good progress. We're anticipating that the move will take place around March 15th. That's the Friday before spring break, so it's possible that the move could take place during spring break, and I feel like that would be great because less disruptive for staff needing services there. We're working together between the landlord and the clinic people, and I've been involved in these discussions about the space, and that's gone really well. You already know that Dr. Random and Al are here, and at this point, we'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have that we haven't touched on.
Connie, were you able to find usage numbers for the last time?
Yes, I did, and I jumped over and going between slides. So we, like I said, we're getting comprehensive quarterly reports right now. But you get monthly reports in your board packets each month. And I can give you for quarter 4, which will be October, November, and December, total visits in October were 310, and November 143. So I don't have December at all yet, but you can see for those 2 months, total visits is at 453, and that's missing 1 month out of that quarter. So we're way higher in total visits for quarter 4.
On one of the slides, it also referenced the savings to our staff because of not having to pay co-pays
Yes.
for certain things. And so I think in terms of other things to consider, that's another factor, which is important.
Yeah, I mean, the costs that are difficult to measure, or the savings that are difficult to measure definitely exist. It's hard to roll them out because it's not a data point, it's not black and white, but recruitment and retention is a goal of the board. I use that. I'm putting that out in our postings and our vacancies right now. I think it's made a difference. We get questions about it. We're standalone right now in Dane County as far as a school district offering that. I think that makes a difference, but I can't put a number to it. Jack said flu shots, we're getting the shots, we're keeping them healthier, but we know, and we respect and honor privacy, so we're not going to cross that line. But I know because staff members tell me it was great. I just went over to the clinic during my prep. I didn't have to miss any time. We didn't have to get a sub. Yeah. So we're saving that way. I'm not going to gather data and measure because that's private about who goes to the clinic. So I'd love to put a number to that for you, but I can't. But it's making a difference.
That type of anecdotal stuff is important. It illustrates those other hidden opportunities.
Gary?
I'd like to thank Al and Doc, because I know that
Yeah.
they got our interest at heart here
Yeah.
to try and get us to where we gotta get, and you guys for the work that the committee does with that. Being on that was very important when it was. I know that we had increases of like 8 and 9%, and a 5% increase is $250,000. So I'm in touch with what you're saying when we're doing that. It's gonna be interesting to see. I don't think we're there. I think it is progressing slower than we think.
Yeah.
My frustration always is how much we're using it I like the idea of you go there first, basically, and if we can save money because they're not sending them to the wrong areas, that's a huge expense, depending on where you
It's
go.
expensive to us too. I mean,
Yeah,
as far
right.
as in our experience, it takes 4 to 5 years for a clinic to run. I mean, it's just.
Oh, now you tell us.
Well, we don't have set patients. It takes that long for.
Where were you when we set this at 2?
Well, I wasn't squelched during that part. No, as far as the process, it's not as, because you have to get, it's an acceptance, it's a rolling
Right.
ball. You know,
Right.
it's totally different than.
You see the future of this, or with the wellness portion in the savings, and that it's going to this. It's just, again, and you guys are trying to get at our participation to be up, but I'll emphasize again, it doesn't work unless that is, and you won't see the savings on the premium side unless the results start coming through on the other. And every time somebody goes to the regular clinic instead of going to ours when it's something that we can handle, that costs us money.
Yep.
So, said it before, it's the same thing. So, but I'm encouraged by a lot of what I'm seeing here, but still, when I see a 25% or 18%, that's, now granted, everything changes in a month, you might not have that many, but there's definitely times, as we got a lot of snifflers around here, that stuff's going on that.
Jack, did you go to the clinic yet?
Feeling the love, Jack.
Feel a little love.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connie,
so
Steve,
much.
thanks, guys.
Great. Okay, on to administrative reports.
All right.
School calendar.
All right, I'm gonna move us along. In your packet, you'll see the calendar for 1819 and 1920. These were developed through work and consultation with our calendar committee. The calendar committee consists of teachers from every building. It has some of our specialists in it, music staff, etc. And someone asked me the other day, how do you get on the calendar committee? Well, if you want to be on the calendar committee, I invite you to be there. So some of the folks who have been there, who have had concerns, I invite them to the table, and we have that dialogue. Peggy sits there as well. That's been very helpful. What you'll see in the calendar, there's not a whole lot of creativity in this one. That's different than anything we've had in the last couple years. We're staying with the same model of having multiple back-to-back staff development days in the August timeframe to be productive with trying to do some back-to-back learning. The one piece that staff wanted to have us move around was which schools had parent-teacher conferences on which nights. So secondary level, we've always put on Monday because we have the least number of events on a Monday night, so we've kept them there. But the elementary and the intermediate school are going to flip to Tuesday and Thursday on alternating years. That just kind of is a preference of staff, and wanting to try that. The other piece you'll see is where spring break is still the third full week in March. I've just tried to keep that consistent as opposed to trying to travel with any holidays. It's also something that we're getting calls well over a year in advance for people wanting to put in vacation time, so it just keeps it consistent. You don't see, again, any of the early releases are not part of any of this model. This is all full day professional development days scattered throughout the calendar. So far, I think we like that model. And then getting out of school, the first year we're out, I think, on the 7th of May. That's on a Friday, or 7th of June. 7th of May would be great.
Saves on the bucket.
Got you kind of excited there, didn't I? That was my surprise.
You should stay till the end of the meeting.
Do not print that beat. That would be bad. So 7th of June, it's on the Friday, the first week in June. The next year we run into leap year, so that caused me a little bit of a problem because we would have then come back on just a Monday. So what I did was I incorporated in, as I have in as many calendars as I can, kind of a snow day makeup day in the spring of the year, and then I added a day at the end, so we come back and we go on a Monday and a Tuesday. But otherwise, I think the calendar came together relatively well. It's relatively balanced between the two semesters, which is always a concern, particularly of my AP teachers at the high school. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But otherwise, I do look for approval of those tonight. Mark?
Just like to compliment the committee for moving Christmas and Easter more towards the middle of the week on these calendars.
There you go. Doing our best there. Ebbs and flows. Everything runs, actually school calendars run depending on where the holidays fall. It really drives it.
So, we need a motion for approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the calendars? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Audit consideration. Steve?
Just to mention that the budget committee is still working on this topic. So at our last budget committee meeting, the audit was on the agenda. We have a report from the auditors, a communication letter to the school board. That letter identifies a varying range of suggestions that include board policy, procedures, practices, the use of technology. The business office has prepared a response to each of those items. We are intending to go through those at a budget committee meeting. We weren't able to do it at the last meeting. So the committee is recommending approval of the audit with the understanding for the rest of the board members that the budget committee is still working through those recommendations, and it's very likely that some of these things will ultimately come back to the full board, as some of them are policy related. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that approving the audit does not mean that the budget committee is not continuing our work on that. And in fact, the budget committee will be returning to this topic at the next scheduled meeting to begin the process of looking at those items that were identified.
I would move approval.
Can I just add a comment? So it's pretty clear, if you've read through some of the report, we're getting a very different level of service from what we previously had. So it just feels great to me. I think we made a really good choice, and I feel like we got really a full physical and not just we took your blood pressure and you're fine and out the door thing. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm very much looking forward to the stuff that they had highlighted with suggestions and recommendations for us. And if other board members have looked through that and have questions on any of those or input for the budget committee, please get back with Steve, because there's a lot in there.
Any other discussion?
The only other comment I'd like to make is this, we're getting used to this, I mean, kudos to our business manager and his staff for all of the work that they do to ensure that these audits, every year you're gonna find something, but it's like, way to go. Job of the morning.
Thank you.
All right, it's, the motion is on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Announcements?
I don't think I have any this evening.
Committee reports, starting with budget. A few other items from budget.
Steve's probably got a whole agenda with this. I'll just touch on a couple things quick. The audit we already did, so that's gonna come back with some areas that their suggestions, and hopefully we'll have ways to improve that. The interesting thing, the PLC is gonna have some expense that I'm sure Steve will talk about. The nice thing is it's in our backyard, so hopefully more people can go. We were talking with Randy too about how getting just a better, it's become such a big thing for our development of our teachers and curriculum and how everything works together. So to get a little more return on investment, how that's working, report coming up. And I liked what's going on with the Forecast 5 and that we did a little more, but hopefully we're gonna see some things coming forward on ways that has shown us that we can save money that we're gonna dive into. And on my side, to say hopefully a little faster than slower with some of this stuff, because there's some savings to be had sooner than later. So, hoping it steal your thunder.
Oh, that was
We got
excellent.
bigger priorities.
So the one action item, as Gary alluded to from the committee tonight, is a request to approve the funding for the PLC conference in the summer of 2018. If you had a chance to look at the notes, you will see that there's a timing issue between when we want to issue the payment to really confirm the slots available. The conference actually takes place in the 18-19 fiscal year, but if we want to reserve the spots, we need to make a payment in the 17-18 fiscal year. We have committed to bringing back a plan to the budget committee to show how to fund the conference through a combination of building and district funds, which we will be doing at a future budget committee meeting. But the recommendation from the committee is to go forward with the payment for the PLC conference to our vendor to make sure that we secure the slots that we are looking for the members of our staff for the summer of 2018. And Tim is in the back if anybody has any questions for him about the conference itself or any of the particulars.
In terms of the dollar value, am I right to conjecture that this is less than it's been in the past because it doesn't include rooms?
It's like $670 per, so
Right,
there's
right.
none of the rooms, travel, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity
Yeah,
for us to get more
right,
people there.
right,
It's
more
right in our
people and
backyard.
less money.
So, we do need a motion.
I so move to
Second.
accept the proposal.
Jack, any other discussion on the PLC proposal? All in favor?
Aye.
And that wraps up budget. Thank you. Curriculum committee?
We moved forward with another phase of being informed of updates on technology availability, and this time we were concentrating on the elementaries. Anything else to add, Tim?
Just that we're probably 2 meetings into a 4-meeting kind of arc on instructional technology. And the 5-8 levels next, and then we'll wrap it up following that.
I went back to the curriculum committee kind of notes. Good information that you're sharing there, so if people have not looked at that data, that's impressive data.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really compliment Herb, who's actually back working tonight. He's really done a great job pulling together the survey data, the inventory data, and a lot of credit, I think, goes to our library media specialists and tech coaches, because they were the ones who designed and facilitated the staff survey that was the basis for a lot of those staff comments and other data.
I would encourage you to go look at some of that data.
Yeah, and I'll just tie it back to, I mean, I think that's something more than one of us probably heard about in the listening sessions in the fall. And here again, you know, it can be frustrating sometimes because we do hear what staff has to say in those listening sessions. And it's not that we're ignoring it. This is another phase in the process where we at least have better data gathered now so that we can make better decisions going forward and come up with solutions and ways to address possible inequities across buildings and so on. But it's all part of the process. We are moving it forward. We did hear it. We do see it. And we'll be looking forward to the solution part of it.
Thank you. Goals committee.
I think we covered most of everything, although there's one item that I'll let Randy talk about, which relates to our linkage meeting coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, linkage meeting's coming up this Wednesday at 4:30 at Heritage Elementary in the large group area. I've been in contact with Larry Hale, and the students are very excited to be working with you. They've done a few different activities and different similar type workshops with staff, and they're going to be, so our attendees there are going to be our administrative team and the board. So I think that's kind of in our purpose when you look at kind of walking away, as opposed to looking at it as, well, what's our targeted purpose as we walk away. I think look at it as kind of a structured listening session to learn from the kids. That's really kind of, I think, what you're looking at, as it's really tried to be a way to learn kind of the perspectives that they have, and as we have conversations, and I think you'll see a lot of the things that they talk about will be, and that they'll engage us, and it's not just going to be them talking to us, it'll be a dialogue, is around things that either have policy or decision-making impacts on us. So I think that's some of the things that will help us. They have, I think, about a dozen kids who are going to be there. They're going to break us into 4 groups, and they're covering 3 topics. So right now they're going to be talking about things like financial awareness, educate on shortcomings in our curriculum, some things potentially on behaviors, harassment, identity. Right now the kids are trying to narrow those things down based on different presentations that they've done and work that they've done. They're going to try to narrow that down. I told them some of our interests as far as some of the things that may impact us, particularly as we're looking at like technology. I know they talked about that last year with us at our administrative level. But yeah, they're gonna basically run the show on Wednesday night. So they have a 10-minute icebreaker, they have the roundtable discussions where they're gonna break us into small groups, and then they're gonna have a 20-minute debriefing. So that's really what our evening is. So looking forward to it, but it's great to be able to interact with our students, and I think this is a group that's well-spoken, well-organized, and has really done a wonderful job really in representing our student body.
Thank you. And we are down to consent agenda, so we can take this as a big chunk or pull anything out for discussion.
I would move approval of everything but pulling the open enrollment recommendations out for separate discussion, probably still approval, but I'd like to.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have all the consent agenda except open enrollment on the table. Any discussion on that portion?
Can I just ask two quick questions of Steve? Of course. Looking on the POs 5,000 plus, I was just curious why like the vinyl print and cut device and the district white paper are put underneath the athletic department. Is it because that field is actually a much larger group with more names next to it? And we're only seeing one section of the spreadsheet?
I'll have to look into that. Which were the two that you're referring to?
Okay, so there's district white paper from Veritiv operating for 18,000, and the group is the athletic department. I got a feeling that's more than the athletic department.
Right.
And then SG 30D vinyl print and cut device for the Innovation Center was put underneath the athletic department on their credit card. That didn't make sense.
That doesn't seem like it's
No,
going right.
I will look into that and get back to you. So.
Maybe they're printing programs
Yeah.
for the games?
Programs,
Yeah, that
banners.
doesn't make
Programs
sense.
and banners?
Some of those.
Plaques.
No, that's buying
Some of
this
those,
is
that's
actually
a piece of equipment.
machine.
Oh.
So
A
some of
machine
that,
to the
some of,
innovation
my
center.
guess is some of that equipment, I know they worked with us on how to go about moving forward the purchase. My guess is that it was used, the credit card that was used, or it was
Oh.
coded differently.
Yeah, we'll
This is
look
a
into
vinyl
that.
cutter
Yeah.
machine for the Innovation Center.
What's that?
Maybe they put the.
Yeah, that
That
doesn't
doesn't
make
sound
sense,
right.
so, yeah, we
Sure,
will check it.
Something's not coded right.
Good catch.
Good reason.
I'm a very bored person on the weekends.
Good job.
I'm waiting for snow so I can snow blow, and I couldn't, so I sat here and looked at this.
Okay. All in
Thank you.
favor of that portion of the consent agendas?
Aye.
Aye. So we are now down to open enrollment.
I would move approval of the open enrollment, and I just want to name it as we have a dialogue because we always have in the past. which
I'll
was-
second that.
Okay, so discussion on open enrollment.
I mean, are there any specific issues, you know, in the past, we've asked questions as it relates to the impact of 4K numbers on that. I mean, if there's anything unique to this set of recommendations that.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Peggy. The last couple of years, the board has voted to dial back a little bit the calculations that we've had for the 4K numbers. This year, the calculation is actually a little bit lower than what you've approved after dialing it back the last couple of years. That's based on the fact that our census is indicating a slightly larger number of students in that particular age band. So we are recommending a lower number than what the recommendation has been in the last couple of years, which actually falls slightly below what the board has approved in the most recent years. The other thing I'd mention is that we do include in the notes, I know it's a lengthy write-up on open enrollment, we do include in the notes how many students actually do enroll based on the approvals that you had the year before. And you will see that in the grades that are other than 4K, we don't have a lot of applicants for those particular grades. So you would see last year at this table, we had some discussion about the 5th grade calculated opening, and was that too high? Well, in the end, we only had 3 applicants join our district in 5th grade. So for a lot of schools, these aren't natural transition points, and so you don't see the applications in 5th grade or 4th grade. So we don't see a lot of applicants in those age groups, and because we currently don't accept seventh grade or ninth grade, which are more natural places where people might consider open enrollment changes, we just don't see a lot of applicants.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just got a comment with the, when we're a growing district like we are, I don't mind a conservative approach at all. When you're constantly building schools and doing so. That's all good. I still don't, you know what I don't.
But it is 9:52.
Pardon?
It is 9:52.
I know.
Go ahead.
It wouldn't take long.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Board business.
Taking a look at some of the convention pieces, I think we've all, for those of you attending the convention, we'll be sending out an itinerary of what each of our days look like at the convention. Rebecca and I'll probably be working on that here in the next day or so. Also at the convention, we're going to have 4 of our students who will have their artwork there. So those of you at the convention have to remind me to pick it up on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So bring it back. But we've often talked about where are some of our students. We have 4 of our students who their work will be there. So that's pretty cool. So we'll be circulating these and talking about that.
Yes.
That's
So
what I
then bring it.
Okay, agenda and meetings.
Obviously, we have a couple of special meetings coming up. The one on this Wednesday at the linkage meeting, which we've already talked about, starts at 4:30 at Heritage. A week from tonight, we have our curriculum presentations. So we do 2 of those per year. So one of those is next Monday. That's also at 4 o'clock at Heritage.
At the library.
In the library. Okay.
The library.
So the library, not the.
Can you tell us where the library is?
The library is
It's
like
the
the
intermediate
old.
library.
is the old intermediate library.
Intermediate library.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's 4 o'clock here.
4 o'clock at Heritage.
No, we're talking about which one?
Monday.
That's
Monday.
on Monday.
The 15th.
Oh, so it's in the,
It's in
I'm
the-
sorry, when's it? I think
4 o'clock next Monday in the library. So the.
library intermediate,
Yep.
Old intermediate.
old intermediate.
15th?
Yeah.
Heritage.
Yeah.
It's at
Yes.
Heritage School. All right, the other committees that we're looking at, Steve, you need budget. So we're looking at, I need budget, and we already have facilities scheduled, we already have goals scheduled. So I'd like to look at a budget and a policy meeting. So,
Gary, you had mentioned.
I'm going 5th to the 10th.
you're gone the 5th.
So Gary's gone the 5th through the 10th. So
What about that week before?
the week before,
First?
what works for the committee?
If you're looking at a budget meeting, what about the 1st?
You looking February 1st?
You going in the morning again?
Okay.
Or what are you doing?
I'm not free till 8:30 on Thursday morning.
Okay.
That doesn't matter to me. Who else is on there?
Jack.
So
What's your
that,
schedule?
that
Can we
day
do-
I've committed to be in the insurance meetings in Middleton on the 1st.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
All right.
Can we do it when, the 31st? Or
Okay.
no, you're going?
No, I'm not, I'm here. February 5th to the 10th, I'm
Yeah,
going.
we have camp at that day.
Can we do the 30th?
30th or the 2nd, either one of those works.
Either one.
Let's do, the 30th.
Sure.
8
Happy
o'clock.
day.
That work?
That works.
30th at what time?
8 o'clock?
8 a.m.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
that meets what you need?
Yeah, and then I need a policy meeting, so that's Mark, Peggy, and Dave.
Just
I'll be doing the first draft
I am
of the
gone
18
from
years
January
budget.
22nd through February 4th. So it'll be the first week in February or a couple days next week.
What about either the 5th or 6th? February? The policy, you have a preference in time? What's good for you, Dave? What's,
Anything 4 o'clock on?
that's,
Yeah.
Mark, how about you?
Depends on the day of the week. If it's Tuesday, it'd have to be after 4:30.
Okay.
If it's Monday, like, anything after 4.
So we just want to do a 4:30? Is there a preferred day of either the 5th or the 6th?
Makes no difference to me.
Next two. Mark, does it matter to you?
6?
6th, 4:30.
So 4:30
That'll be policy.
policy.
I think that's what I need right now.
And when is the goals committee?
Goals committee is Wednesday, the 7th at 7:30 a.m. And
Would you
facility-
mind, could we make that 4:45? Just
Oh.
Oh, you mean the policy one?
On the 6th?
the policy one and the
Yep,
6th.
4:45.
Just make the traffic piece a little easier for me.
Oh, okay.
So the 6th at 4:45, yep.
Come out of Madison,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's true.
We also have a facilities meeting on January 30th at 4:30.
Correct.
Oh,
So that's what I need.
Is that a problem?
we're doubling that day, okay.
Is that
I'll
a
just stay
problem?
here from the morning till.
Okay, let's be on the 3rd, you can do it.
Yeah, I was there on the
Okay,
3rd.
I think
Nice,
we're
come on, suck it up there.
good to close.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
You know, stage everybody.
My iPad
Good to see you, Jack.
Yay.
Our